Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this March 19th, 2023. Tonight it is Open Lines, Open Topics, where you are the guest. All you have to do is just ask us your questions in the chat room or call into the show. We'll have the number up there on the screen shortly. And you can ask us anything you want. You can call in to comment. You can tell us your stories. And we can discuss whatever topic is on your mind. There is nothing off limits on this show. You take the show where you want to go, and we will follow. It's always an interesting time on Open Lines, Open Topics. So you don't want to miss it. Don't go anywhere. Well, hello, everybody. Once again, I am your host, Bishop Bryan Willett, here with my co-host, Jamie Wolfe. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
I'm doing good. A little sore from earlier festivities, a little dirty. Glad y'all don't have smell-o-vision because I'm dirty, dusty, and a little sweaty from earlier. But
you're full of barbecue pork.
I'm full of barbecue. Yeah. So I'm happy. If I start to nod off, y'all wake me back up.
We've had quite the day. We had to deal with the tax assessors today to look at the new property, and that was not that much fun. And we had to also pull out the carpet, or I should say Jamie pulled out the carpet while I got the studio ready for tonight's show to get the polish ready. We're going to polish that cement and make it nice. And eventually maybe we'll put in some wood at some point in the future, but right now our focus is just getting it functional so that we can start holding public services over there and also get the offices set up too, which don't really require much. We just need to put the furniture in for that, and that won't be too difficult. But we are today going to celebrate with our liturgical libation, which is Dom Perignon 2013. It is an excellent, I think to date, it is my favorite champagne. And I've had some good champagnes out there. I've had Krug, I've had Cristal. I like the classic flavors. I prefer the doughiness and the breadiness of the more classic type of champagne. The fruitier kind of crisp apple taste that you tend to get in more of the modern iterations, I'm not much a fan of. So we're going to crack that bottle here in just a moment. But before I do, I just want to give a shout out to our fantastic team of volunteers. We have Brandon and we have Moosh. We have Danielle as Mystic. Moosh is actually Val, and we have Paula, I believe, out there as well. Yeah, I see her right now. And so we are so grateful to all of them for making the chat rooms across the internet safe. We are simulcasting on all platforms tonight. So whether you're coming to us on Instagram, if you're coming to us on Facebook, whether you're coming to us on Twitch or YouTube, or even just the audio-only version on Spreaker, or Jamie's Twitter, or X, I guess.
Twitter, whatever.
I don't care. I mean, I'm so over that damn company and Elon Musk that I don't really care. Anyway, wherever you're watching us, we are so grateful, and we bid you welcome, because we are going to be looking at the chats all across the various platforms. You can ask your questions, okay? Tonight, anything that you want to talk about, any subject matter you want to know more about, we will do our best to answer those questions. If we don't know the answer, we will tell you we don't know. That doesn't happen too often because most of the time you're asking stuff about the paranormal or esotericism or metaphysics, and we're more than equipped to handle most of those kinds of questions, and the theological is always a big one.
Oh, yeah.
I also want to remind all of you that, remember, this is a church-sponsored program. Okay, the church pays for this completely on its own, out of pocket. We have no commercials on the video version, if you hadn't already noticed, and there's only a few commercials on the audio-only version for the podcast version, and I can tell you that that only pays for about 10% of the cost of hosting all of the archives. So it's really not much of a moneymaker. But we do our best to try to keep this as easy to watch and as free as possible. So even though it is free to you, it is not free to us to bring it to you. So please remember us in your donations. The Holy Nicolean Catholic Church pays for it. It is a fully tax-exempt federal 501c3. So we always appreciate your support. If you enjoy what we do here, if you get value out of it, remember to support it. The moderators will put those links, I think they already did from before, they'll put those links out there throughout the show in the various chats around the internet. Or you can just go to esotericcatholic.org and click on the donation button. We would greatly appreciate it. It is your support that keeps it on the air. If you want to keep the show on the air, support it, okay? Because the church might not always be able to. And remember, this is your church, even if you're not a part of it in any kind of traditional way. Remember, the Holy Nicolean Catholic Church doesn't care about denominations. Nope. We don't care about those kinds of human boundaries that people put up, the polarities of life. The dualisms that people love to indulge in. We don't do that here. Essentially, we look at this as the human experience, and this church is the church of humanity. Okay, so you can be a part of our community just by simply being here with us and spending time with us. There's no demands on you. There's no expectation from you.
Oh, yes, humanity. Rather nostalgic.
We make it as painless as possible. Religion should be
able to talk to each other.
Imagine that. Wouldn't that be nice if it could be that way again? I don't know. But we're going to make it interesting here in just a moment. And briefly, we will talk a little bit more about the church. If you haven't been following the last few episodes, we did purchase a brand new location, a public location. It is going to serve as the retreat house for our benefactors who can come and receive their spiritual nourishment as needed. I'm getting strange looks from Tracy over there. Is there anything wrong? Oh, okay.
No, it's been working its way out.
It's been popping itself out. Yep. I'll fix it later during one of the breaks. Oh, really? That's interesting.
It's reminding us that it's austere today.
Tracy said that it happened at the office, so it seems to be happening here. Weird stuff. Okay, but we'll talk about the church more. We purchased a public location so people can come. Okay, we can now service people more directly, and we'll be able to meet more people with their spiritual issues because we'll have public offices where they can come, and we don't always have to arrange to travel out to them. They can come to us, and that will make things so much more streamlined, and I think we'll be able to serve and help a whole lot more people. So remember, your donations support that too. It's not just this show. If you believe in the work that we do, remember to support it because nobody else does. Okay? No one else out there supports this ministry. It's not like, we're not like the big charities out there where, they get money no matter what from just people that are just out there. There's only a special kind of person that understands the importance of this work and this kind of show. And that's all of you. So we really need you guys, the loyal listeners and the loyal viewers, to support it. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and let's celebrate with the Dom Perignon 2013 because we want to kind of celebrate the fact that the closing went well, and we have the keys to the property, and we're already starting to prepare it for actual public use, which should be very soon, by the way. Watch the channel. You'll start to see that one day you're going to tune in to watch Mass, and it's going to be at the new location.
Yeah, it's going to be a different view. Oh, you hear that?
So
Sound of cold ice.
Cold ice and wonderful champagne. So I'm going to crack this.
Are you going to launch the cork across the room?
I am.
Watch out, Tracy.
Not with this wine. If it was like Cook's or Corbel, maybe.
Good old Cook's.
But I'm not taking any chances.
Cook's got me through many a New Year's Eve back in the day when I was just a private in the Army.
You know, it's not a bad tasting wine, but it is very high in sugar, so it gives you a headache.
Yeah.
I've never had a headache on real champagne, but the sparkling wines from the cheaper sparkling wines from America tend to be a very, I would say, sweet and high in sugar content, and not necessarily as pleasant after effects of drinking that alcohol, all that alcohol with.
You know me with the high end stuff. Pinkies out, bitches. Pinkies out.
And so you just want to burp it.
That was a burp.
Yeah. Look at that wonderful cork.
Ooh.
I guess I should put this on camera so you guys can
Professional
see.
pour.
Well, maybe not as professional as it could be, but I don't want to get it all over the computer either.
No.
Here you go.
Thank you very much.
And one for Tracy's here with us.
You may see her arm momentarily.
You'll see the arm come out, but she only wants a half a glass.
Look at the bubbles. Can y'all see the bubbles? Hang on, let me see. Oh, look at that.
So you can
The sweet nectar.
hand that over to her over there. And let me pour myself one here.
Coming at you.
Again, this is my go-to champagne when I want to really celebrate and enjoy an occasion. I would much rather have Dom Perignon than some of the far more expensive ones that are out there. Okay, so
all right.
Cheers, everybody. Cheers, and
Prost.
I'll just salute you from here. Okay, how about that?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for all of you who stepped up to the plate and helped us actually acquire this property.
Oh. Yep, camera's off. We'll be back next week, y'all.
Is
Got
that
some
wonderful?
drinking to do. Oh yeah, that's good. Pinky's out.
That's not
Pinky's
Cook's,
out.
is it?
That is not Cook's.
Good stuff.
Yeah, you don't get this at Kroger, I don't think.
No.
This ain't no Kroger.
Well, I will
This ain't no Kroger
say,
champagne.
remember the Super Kroger out near our old house? Mm-hmm. They used to have it,
Really?
but it didn't sell. So I bought all of them when they put it on discount, and
Outstanding.
they never put it back up.
Huh.
But I got several
for you.
bottles for $80,
Nice.
which is like really low.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Score.
yeah. They were just trying to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But this is also to all of you.
Yep.
I wish we could
Good bubbles to y'all.
pop champagne for everybody and just share it through the screen, because
Maybe one day we'll be able to celebrate in person.
well, that's what this location is for, actually, is a place where you all can come and we can have little events, from time to time throughout the year. We can set up little get-togethers with our community and, crack some champagne and actually do this in person. That's part of the purpose to this. I don't know if the county fully understands what our our intentions are here, but they don't understand our ministry. Yeah, that we'll have to probably have a deeper conversation at some point, because the one that we had today I was not as impressed with. But anyway, we're still working out the kinks that come with expansion, and this is part of that. And I have to say, it's a little bit well, it's time consuming and it's grueling. It's par for the course. But the more you have, and the more you develop, and the more responsibility you create, the more the headaches come. So it's all part of it. But usually we drink scotch on this show, or bourbon. Tonight it is champagne, because this is a night worth celebrating. And
Very nice.
if not for the church to be able to spend open lines, open topics with all of you. Okay. And I just want to say right now, I want to thank, we've got 132 listeners right now, and viewers, not listeners. Listeners could be much higher than that.
I really feel like I should have took a shower before I came on air now.
No, they can't smell you. I guarantee you they can't smell you. But no, honestly, it is. We're really grateful. I mean, simulcasting has been so successful to really expand. I think we hit 150 last week. So
somewhere around there, yeah.
Yeah, and we're only going to grow from here. So make sure you like and subscribe and tell everybody about this show and all the all the things we talk about here, because no one else is doing what we're doing. I actually did an interview today with a wonderful gentleman who was researching esoteric mysticism.
He was a nice fella.
He was.
Yeah, he was.
And, he said to me, he says, I've talked to a lot of people in this work, and I've interviewed a lot of people, and there's nobody that's doing what you're doing. And
True.
I think that is an important thing, that we continue to do it for that reason, if not, for no other reason, for the fact that it needs to be done, and we're the only one out there doing it. But joining us tonight from Tennessee is Brandon Milam. How are you doing tonight, Brandon?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. I don't got my champagne, but I got an old classic.
It's sparkling. I mean, that's something, right?
Yeah. Bubbling.
Yeah. And hopefully with your interview, it doesn't get heavily edited.
Oh, it's not that kind of interview. This was a researcher that's researching for on esoteric mysticism directly for a larger organization. It might turn into some kind of documentary at some point. I'm not really sure what the intentions were, but they're not. It wasn't like an interview where it's going to air somewhere on the radio. I try not to do those anymore, unless they're live. Honestly, I really don't. For anybody out there listening, I don't mind coming on your show. I really don't. I'm always willing to help out a new show or a show that is serious and professional, but I will not do pre-records anymore. Okay, because I'm sick of being edited. So either you do it live, so I can make sure that everything that I say is listened to in the way and in context to what I intended it, which means that it doesn't get edited out. It's the only way I'll ever do a podcast again. It has to be live, okay? But I'll do them, but you got to make sure that it's a live show. Okay, so Father Chris should be joining us in a little bit. He had some kind of meeting that might be running a little bit later than usual. He did say that don't panic if he doesn't show up right at the start of the show, because he said that he will be there. He will be here. So hopefully by the time we get to the next segment, he will have joined us, or even before we finish this one. But in the meantime, I'm going to take one more sip of this fantastic champagne
too.
And I think, Brandon, why don't you take us into our first question from the ether tonight?
So the first question comes from Tammy. She asks, and I hope I get this correctly. She asked, what is the significance of the mezuzah? And is this a tradition that the tradition that other faiths follow?
Well, the significance in Judaism is that you put, it's a little plaque of scrolls of the Torah, usually with a part of the Torah specifically that's designed to remind the household that lives there of the commandments of God, the laws of God. So it's just a way to remember, because Judaism is very much focused on the remembrance of the things that God has done for his people, that this is another way to sort of pray, in a way that you're keeping your mind focused intently on God. Okay, so it is it's kind of fundamental to that, and so most practicing Jewish households do this.
Does it kind of go back to the Passover as well, as far as painting the door with not the blood of the lamb, but with the scrolls itself?
It is kind of related
on the
to
door
that.
jamb, right?
It does, and it's there's actually parts of the of Deuteronomy that talks about this type of practice. So it is. It's related to that. Now, whether or not other cultures do it, I mean, Christianity has a similar thing with the crucifixes, and particularly in Catholic households or Orthodox households, having icons or crucifixes. I know growing up in a Catholic family, it was very common for every room in the house to have a crucifix. That's normal practice, and so that's in a similar way, and a lot of times they hang it above a door frame. In a
So I
lot of
kind
ways.
of have, that goes back to, I don't know who started it, but the open horseshoe facing up over the threshold.
It is
It's all kind of similar.
It's similar to that. I mean, even my goodness, even the Chinese have sort of a thing where they have the cat that has the paw up, which sort of welcomes in
the bobbling
good
eyes.
fortune. Some of them. Well, I mean, they have fixed ones, but sometimes it's just a paw that moves, or it's a fixed statue of a cat, a golden cat that sort of welcomes you in, and it brings good fortune. I mean, of course, they're all a little bit different. The cat's not to remind you of the commandments of God, and the crucifix is not so much about the commandments of God as it is about the sacrifice of the cross and reminding us of our salvation, where it comes from. But it all sort of harkens back to the same concept that these things are put into place as markers of divine connection. And those are, I think, important things for us to do, because life can become so distracting and mundane that we have to do little things like that to bring the presence of God more tangibly into our lives. And so it's a wonderful little practice. And honestly, even Christians could do it. I mean, there's nothing that says that they can't or shouldn't. The cross is more of the focus, though, for the Christian than the law of God. Because remember, Jesus in the Christian faith fulfills the law. He completes it. Doesn't abolish it, he fulfills it. And now we live by a different standard. And so it's a nice little practice that I would suggest. But I mean, honestly, putting crucifixes up in your home is sort of the appropriate equivalency for the Christian, if that makes sense. So there you go, Brandon.
Excuse me. The second question comes from April. She asks, I have a basic understanding of the Holy Trinity, but I still am not totally sure how it all works together. What is your view on it?
Not sure anybody knows how it all works together. It's one of the mysteries of the Christian faith. But we can kind of, I think, clarify it a bit or simplify it a little bit by making some general comparisons. So remember, God is one. Okay, there is only one God. The Trinity does not imply, as I've heard some non-Christians say that it does. It doesn't. Does not imply that God is a multitude. That there's more of, there's three of them. These are not different gods. The Trinity is not made up of different gods. It is the same God, but it is three persons in the same God. Not even three identities, although one might use that terminology cautiously if they use it correctly. It is sort of like an identity, but it is still the same God in the same sense that, well, look at me. Okay. I'm a bishop, right? I am also a business owner, and I am also a pilot, although I don't fly that much anymore, but I used to. And those are three different states of my being that take completely different aspects of my personality, aspects of my nature, and put them into different or have different functions, right? So the bishop doesn't really fly the planes any more than the pilot really runs the business. They're all different hats that I wear. Now, that's a very poor comparison. Another way perhaps to understand it is to look at the human nature. Okay. I think most Christians can understand that that a person is made up of a body, of a spirit, and a soul. Okay. Or you could say, if you want to make it even more simple, you can say that we have a body, a mind, and a soul, or a spirit. And some people use those terms interchangeably. And for this purpose, it's okay to do so. Okay. They are kind of interchangeable to a certain extent, although in reality, they're not. For purposes of simplifying this discussion, let's put the soul and the spirit into the same category. So we can say that a human being is made up of body, a mind, and a spirit soul. Okay. Well, the reality of that is that they're all the same person, but they're all different aspects of that person's nature and with different functions. But it's not like the mind is different or is a different person from the body. And it's not like the soul is a different person from the mind. It is they all make up the same reality of the individual. So God is the individual one God. All right. There's no other outside of that God, right? However, he does emanate out in this Trinitarian form. So God the Father is sort of the unknowable part of God, the part that is beyond us, the part that is unfathomable, the part that's ineffable. And so we have nothing to relate to with the Father. He's too far beyond our fallen nature. So in order to bring God into the context of human understanding, we are then given Jesus, the Son of God, who can then incarnate as God, incarnate human flesh, and be both 100% man and 100% God at the same time, so that he can not lose any of his divine nature, but be able to relate to us fully in our humanity and always accept sin. Jesus does not sin, but he assumes all of the deficits of human nature in every other respect. So he can feel pain, he can suffer. Jesus is not omniscient. Jesus is not really even omnipotent. Jesus is not able to do anything that the Father does not will. Okay, so he's not a magic man who can just go out there and just make anything happen. He can only do what the Father, wills. And even though it is the same God, there is different functionality to the two different persons of the Holy Trinity, Father and Son. And then, of course, Jesus, being a man, can only be here for the lifetime of a man, right? So he can die just like any man does, and he did die. But he resurrects as only God can, and then changes our nature in that process, then eventually returns back to the kingdom of heaven in the ascension after the resurrection. And in order to sustain the church through what is now the end times, because the end times started the minute Jesus ascends to heaven, the minute the church is established in Pentecost, that's when the end times begin. And we've been in the end times ever since, because the end times mean the times of salvation. God, the work is complete. That's what Jesus means when he dies on the cross. And he says, right before he dies, he says, it is finished. The work is done. He has accomplished salvation for all who desire it. And now those of us who desire it, pursue it. And the Holy Spirit is sent to us, the Paraclete, to sustain us in that action. So that while we can't have Jesus with us in that special way anymore, and the Father is, again, always and will forever be beyond our capabilities of understanding, the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit, can then sustain us while we continue to build the church and bring other people to salvation through awareness and understanding. So that is the best way that I can, as a bishop, give an explanation for what the Holy Trinity is.
Probably a better explanation than most can muster up.
It's not an easy thing to talk about because it is ultimately a mystery. It is hard for us to fathom what it can be like to be three persons, but
but your example makes it a lot more palatable, because a lot of folks can't get past 100%. How can you have three 100%? It's the same person, but the way you explain it makes regular folks go, oh, okay.
I think it's easier to understand that there's the different persons assume different functionalities, even though they are 100% the same thing. Right. How they function is where the differences are. Okay, just in the same way that as a bishop, I function very differently than when I was a pilot, or when I run our business, our secular business that pays the bills. Because the church doesn't pay the bills, I pay the bills with the business, right? And my wife is the main operations manager for that business. So those are different roles. And even in that, you could say, I have to be a dad, which is different from being a husband, which is different from being a business partner, which is different from my having to be the pastor to my wife. Think of how different all those roles are. I share parenthood with her. I'm also her spouse. I'm also her business partner, and I'm also her pastor. Those are four very different people, but it's all me, but they're all very different people, and they all behave very differently. I'm not sure she loves the pastor as much as she loves the husband. I'm not sure I love the pastor as much as I love the husband, you know what I mean? but it is a way to try to, I think, conceptualize something that is ultimately beyond us. So I'm glad you agree.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Brandon, I don't know if you have questions about that, but I'm willing to answer any that you have.
So yes, there is a follow-up question to that. Would you be able to explain why Jesus says, "Why have you forsaken me"?
That is a very interesting part of the Passion, and I think what it does is it speaks to his humanity, that his human side could feel the depravity. He could feel the loss. He could feel that sense of disconnection that all of us suffer with in our fallen humanity.
Can you imagine the pain and the agony he was going through?
Yeah. So I think it's important to remember that even though Jesus is God, his human nature is still completely human. And even though he could not sin, that did not mean that he could not feel the intense tragedies of human experience. And in that moment of facing death and feeling the trauma of his death, because it was a very brutal death, and he was in that process of dying and in extreme agony. Understand, crucifixion, the crucifixes that we hang up in our homes, per our last question, look nice and neat and clean and comforting almost, because if you grow up as a Catholic and you see that, you're used to it. There is some peace to seeing a crucifix. It's not looked at in a morbid way, even though some crucifixes can be quite morbid with a lot of blood and gore, which I do think they should be as bloody and gory as possible, because I think the message needs to be hit home. We shouldn't look at a crucifix and be too comfortable, although I think sometimes Catholics can get too comfortable with it, because it is also an aspect of peace, as I just mentioned. But I think it's also important to remember that crucifixion was not peaceful. You didn't die by bleeding to death. You didn't die by dehydration or starvation. You died by asphyxiation. The only way you could die, the way that the Romans would crucify people, is that your strength would give out, because you were hanging there, and you would have to hold yourself up by pulling yourself up to breathe. If you just let yourself go, you couldn't breathe. And so what would happen is you would get, through exhaustion, you'd get to a point where you couldn't pull yourself up anymore, and then you would asphyxiate, which is extreme agony. And it usually took sometimes days for it to get to this point, because they'd stop breathing, they'd pull themselves up, take a quick breath, and then let themselves fall again. They keep doing this for sometimes days. Jesus's death was only 3 hours. But I think that was the mercy of the Father that allowed that to happen. And sometimes, and it's even depicted in the Bible, that they would break the legs, to expedite the demise of the executioner, of the people that were being executed. So the crucifixion was extreme agony, and so his humanity felt it the way that we would have felt it if it was happening to us. He wasn't thinking as God in that moment. He's, I'm about to go to the kingdom of heaven. I don't need to worry about this. All right, so it's a short moment of pain, and it'll be over with. That's not that might be how God could conceive of it, but it's not how man would conceive of it. You would feel every moment of that agony, and Jesus did. So the scriptures are showing us this to remind us and to make sure that it's understood that he felt it. This was also a way to refute any beliefs that were prevalent at the time, particularly with the Gnostics, that Jesus only faked his death, that it was only an appearance, that God couldn't really die, so he just put on a show for our benefit. This was kind of a way of making sure that the people who read these particular Gospels understood that, no, he actually did die, and he actually felt it as a human being would have felt it.
Yeah, if you think about that, I mean, and get into the deep meat of it like you are, that's one of the most powerful lines in the Gospels.
Oh, absolutely.
Without a doubt.
The final statements of Jesus are so powerful. We sometimes reflect on those during Good Friday, or I've been to church services there's not really much of a rubric for, I mean, there is a rubric for Good Friday, but there's a lot of freedom that a church can have. So going to different Catholic churches on Good Friday can render a lot of different experiences, and each one of them can be really quite remarkable in terms of how they practice or celebrate, I wouldn't say celebrate, how they honor Good Friday. And sometimes I've been to services where they just spend an hour contemplating on his last words and what they mean, and how powerful that is. And so, yeah, it is finished. And my God, why have you forsaken me? Powerful reflections into the mind of Jesus in that moment. So that's what it's really trying to tell us.
I really think that answers the question.
Great.
At least better than what I would have heard around here.
Most likely, yes.
I don't know if that's saying much, but I'll take it.
All right. So for the third question, this is an interesting question, pretty much because of what I was taught growing up. But why is it taught that the Antichrist will do things that the Jewish people believe that their Messiah is said to do? Is the Christian Antichrist and the Messiah of Judaism the same?
No, they're not the same. And any similarities between them is purely a superficial analysis, because the Messiah that the Jewish people are awaiting and still awaiting, because they did not recognize Jesus to be the Messiah, and there's reasons for that. The Jewish people had an expectation that came with the Messiah. They really were expecting a warrior king to come and take back Israel, take back the land from the foreign invaders of the Romans, and then reestablish I guess that you could say the theocracy of the Jewish world, bringing back the temple. I think some of these similarities get confused in these weird end times sort of modern day prophecy things that people come up with in the evangelical movements that try to, read every sentence in Revelation and apply it to something that's happening today, which is a complete misunderstanding of the book of Revelation and is not relevant to any true Christian theology. So I think they're looking for some kind of charismatic world leader who's going to come back, and the third temple will be reestablished under them, and everyone's going to think it's great. And so I think they're trying to see parallels between what the Jewish people are waiting for and what Christians think is going to happen. And it's superficial at best, and it's a misunderstanding at worst, because we've talked a lot about this on the show. We've talked a lot about this on the Nicolaitan Network. Father Chris and I have talked about the eschatology and how the theology has been so corrupted. But the book of Revelation is not a word for word, line by line prophecy for events that are about to unfold now. The book of Revelation was written for Christians that understood apocalyptic symbolism, which was a good code to write things about the things that were going on in their lifetime 2,000 years ago without coming under the suspicion of the Romans for, which could have labeled them as treasonous, and then they could have been executed themselves, and many of them were. So it was a safe way of talking about the government, and we take for granted these freedoms today. We can say our government sucks, and I do all the time, don't I? I think government sucks, period. But if I 2,000 years ago, living in, Jerusalem, for example, under the occupation of the Roman Empire, I could have been killed for saying the government sucks. Yeah. That was treason to them back then. So the way that you did it is you did it in code. You did it in a code that the Romans couldn't understand because they didn't have any apocalyptic literature. It was something that was very specific to the groups of Jews at that time. So the book of Revelation is almost entirely about that. The part of it, and you might say, well, then why is it even in the Bible? Well, I can tell you why, because there is something prophetic about it. It still does tell the ultimate conclusion of the work of grace in the world through the grace of the cross. Jesus does return, will return. That is a fact of Christian faith. Okay, it is part of the Christian faith, and you can't call yourself Christian and deny that. He will come back. He will return, and when he returns, he will completely wipe out the old heaven and the old earth, and replace it with a new heaven and a new earth, and the universe will be perfected once again. It will return to its original splendor. And the only difference is now we who have been saved will be perfected with it. And then that brings us back to restored fully from the fall that man endured and contributed to in original sin. So it's a complete correction. In the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, you have the fall from grace, how the universe became corrupted, and in the book of Revelation, you get how it's fixed. But it's not a prophecy in the sense that there's like some kind of like hidden code, and if you can really decode the code, then you might be able to find who the Antichrist is, and you might be able to find when it's going to happen. That is nonsense. I mean, that you're actually dishonoring the book of Revelation by applying it that way, because that is not what biblical prophecy is. Biblical prophecy is about Jesus, and that's it. It's not about our lives. It's not about your life. It's not about the earth. It's about Jesus and what he does for us. So any biblical prophecy prior, in terms of the prophets, is about the foretelling of the coming Messiah. Jews think he hasn't come yet. Christians believe that Jesus was the Messiah. But either way, whether you take the Jewish stance or the Christian stance, it's still a prophecy about the Messiah. It's not about the end times, and looking for this Antichrist or that Antichrist, and looking for this end of the world and that end of the world scenario. That's all nonsense. And if you think life is really terrible right now and that we must be close to the end times, well, then you don't know your history very well. No. Because we have never lived so well. This world has never been so safe. You think you're living in such horrible times. You're just you're so pampered by the fact that we as human beings have made a pretty good life for ourselves. Most of us can live at least in a moderately decent middle class lifestyle. The majority of people can. I know there's people that struggle and suffer. I get that. I know a lot of people do paycheck to paycheck. I understand that. But overall, that's still better than anybody who wrote the book of Revelation or anybody that lived at the time the book of Revelation was being written. That's still better than anything they could have ever conceived of in their lifetime. Okay, you don't know how bad it was. You really take history for granted if you think that, we're so bad off now that this must be the end times. Well, first of all, you're always in the end times, okay? I already said that. But what's more important is that we need to understand that we have never lived so well. And that's actually the problem. That's why there's so much spiritual apathy. If you think that people out there are doing all sorts of horrible things and they're godless people and they don't believe in they don't go to church and they don't, they live these immoral lives, the only reason why they are able to do that is because life is so good. It's afforded them the luxury to choose those lifestyles.
We got spoiled.
We're a spoiled race. We are. And we think that, the war in Ukraine is the end of the world. I mean, can it be? I mean, of course, you're always just one step away from people pulling the nuclear bombs. I mean, that's been a threat since the 60s. I mean, the 50s even. I mean, They used to hide under the desks in the 1950s. You go and turn on a show from the 1950s. It looks idyllic, right? Leave It to Beaver.
And we were hiding under desks in the 70s still, too.
Yeah. So the reality of it is, okay, life has actually still, as bad as it is, and it's always going to be bad because, we're human beings and we keep screwing things up, but it's still nowhere near as bad as it's ever been at any point previously in history, okay? And the godlessness that a lot of Christians like to call out is really strictly due to the fact that people have the luxury of being godless. There was a time where you didn't have that luxury. And a lot of people, 1,000 years ago were forced to believe in religion. Otherwise, they were going to get killed.
Yep.
All right. So understand that at least you have the freedom. You have the freedom to be like, I don't want to believe in God. And no one's going to kill you for that. No government's going to come down and say, you need to be executed for this. Ask the Cathars if they think that life was so good for them back then. I think it was the Pope that said, kill them all and let God sort them out.
Yeah,
that was the Pope that said that.
That's where that came from. Yeah.
Now, I don't remember which Pope it was, but I don't keep track of things like that. But I mean, can you imagine if the Pope today said that? I mean, you just wouldn't even see that. So understand that we get a little bit better as time goes on, but our concept of what the ideal gets a little worse, and we think that life is so bad. So we're always looking for the Antichrist. We're always looking for the end times. But that is just bullshit. That is just bullshit. That is not a proper use of the book of Revelation. Book of Revelation is about one thing only, that Christ will keep his promise. He will return, and everything in the end will be set right. And that's all you need to take out of the book of Revelation, and that's the only reason it's in the book in the first place. So the only reason why it's in the Bible is just to make sure that you understand that that's what's going to happen. There was a lot of debate, actually, when the Bible was being formed. And let's not forget, the Bible was not compiled into its current form for about 400 years after the birth of Christ. Okay? So, long time, all right? It didn't just fall from the sky, and, it's not the Quran. It wasn't dictated by some angel directly from God's mouth. Okay? It was a book of inspired people who wrote it as inspired people. And it's not meant to be flawless, and it's not meant to be perfect. It's meant to inspire you. If you try to do anything more with it by turning it into some dogmatic, punishment by death if you don't follow this to the letter of the law, well, you're missing the whole point. And I know a lot of Christians do that. Okay, so now that's
sorry to disappoint you, Kirk Cameron's friends. I was sucked into the series too many, many years ago.
I'm sure it's a fun, entertaining series.
It was. I told you, I think I mentioned on this podcast, when I was still going to Christian church before I fell off for a while. I mean, that was like a overnight lock-in thing you do at the church.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I am Brandon's got his stories
not
too.
So much.
He's talked about, you guys have a lot of similarities in your backgrounds as far as what you put up with.
Yeah.
His is a little worse.
Mine's more Midwest. No, I have no complaints.
And you had a Catholic side of your family. So
I did. And my church years growing up were good.
Yeah.
But it was just so much was just watered down.
Yeah.
But that's a good segue into the next question. I think April had one in the chat.
Okay, what is it? This one right here?
So she asked, what is the rapture, and how does it play into the end times?
There is no rapture.
The rapture is a complete fabrication by Darby, right? What was
it Darby or Derby?
Darby.
Yeah.
John.
It's bullshit.
Let me. I have to remind myself now. John. Darby.
So can you say that again?
It's bullshit.
Let me bring it up. Let me bring up his John Nelson Darby. Yeah, he is a pre-tribulational rapture.
Theorist.
I would not even call him a theologian. He's definitely a theorist. It was invented basically in the late 1800s. He read some verses in scripture.
I know, y'all. I felt betrayed too.
Rapture doctrine invented in 1830. That's 1830. And it was never part of Christianity, even Protestantism. There was no John Calvin and Martin Luther would not have had would have been like, you've lost your mind. If you would have come to them and say, oh, what about the rapture? They would have known what you're talking about. Neither one of them. So even the Protestants would have been in full agreement with the Catholics and the Orthodox.
Rapture is a song by Blondie.
Yeah, there is absolutely no application to it. It was invented. Darby made it up based upon a retelling of a few verses that he took out of context. And the worst part about rapture theology is that it elevates man to being above Jesus, being better than Jesus. And you might say, well, that's not true. How can you say that, Bishop? Let me explain to you why that is. Jesus, in his perfection, died. Yes, he died for us, but he still died. He didn't, like we said before, he didn't fake it. It wasn't an appearance. It wasn't an illusion. He actually does this. Okay? Why would you think that you in your fallen, broken, sinful nature, that you get a get out of jail free card. You don't have to die. But Jesus did. That is so arrogant. That is so absolutely arrogant that it shows how much human ego you have if you think that you need something like rapture theology to feel good about yourself. That's because you're afraid, all right? You're buying into a load of crap just because you're afraid. Instead of focusing your attention on grace and understanding what is actually said in the Bible and the context in which it was said, and sticking to the teachings of Jesus, you're just believing what some lunatic a couple hundred years ago said. Okay, it was a fabrication. Anybody prior to the 1830s would not have known. No Christian, regardless of Christian denomination, and by 1830 there were a lot of them. Okay, not one would have known what you were talking about with the rapture. That was a pure invention. And now evangelicals and fundamentalists have eaten it up. Hook, line, and sinker. They love it. They love it. They can't get enough of it. So, but it is absolutely a heresy because it puts man above God. It means that Jesus has to die. Jesus goes through death, but you special Christians, you're going to be protected from it. That's not what the scriptures say. Go back and read it in full context. All right, read it within the context of which those verses that Darby picked out were written. You can you can take anything from any book, not just the Bible. You can take anything from any book and just read one or two lines from 3 or 4 chapters and claim it says anything. And it will. Because anything you take out of context to that degree is always going to be so ambiguous that you can just turn it into anything you want. This is how the horoscopes work in the newspaper. All right? This is why people, read them and be like, oh, Cancer's going to come into fortune today. Yeah. Or, Sagittarius is going to have, some trouble at work. Of course, there's going to be at least a few Sagittariuses out there that have trouble at work that day. There's going to be a few Cancers that get lucky that day. So it's so ambiguous that, of course, you could almost apply it to anything and anyone. And that's what people like Darby are doing, and that's what...
Yeah, you'll find something to apply it to.
Of course you will.
You're naturally will want to do
because
that.
Humans have hindsight bias, and they keep to that, they hold to that, and we're really very poor critical thinkers. As a species, we're not too good with that. It takes a lot of training to be critical, and it takes a lot of self-reflection, which people do not want to have to do. People do not want to look deep into their souls. They don't want to do the examination of conscience. That's why everybody, including Catholics, hate the sacrament of confession, which is one of the best sacraments of all, and it's the one they hate the most because they don't want to have to do the self-reflection. They don't want to have to face themselves. It's dark in there. It is. They don't want to have to face themselves. And this is another way of trying to escape the harsh reality of the fallen world and your sinful nature. You don't get to get exempted from your sin. You still have to go through the trial of it. In order to be perfected, you need that pain and suffering. Otherwise, you will never understand the perfection of heaven when you, if you're lucky, get there. So
you never learn anything through comfort.
No, you don't, and you never will. See, that's the whole thing, and this is what people just don't understand. I wish I could tell them this, but
You just did.
I guess I did.
Share the message, y'all.
Get it out there.
Well.
So somebody edit this and put it out there, right? So Brandon, I don't know. What do you think of that? You grew up with rapture theology, did you?
I want to say maybe.
Baptists don't typically do, I don't think.
If I did, it wasn't taught near as much as other things I've talked about.
Okay. I don't think it's typical for Baptists. It's more evangelical today. It's more evangelical.
But now what I was taught was, as long as you believe in Jesus, you will go to heaven. Yeah. I was taught that. That was hammered into me.
Well, as long as you know what the word believe actually means and derives from, then that's true. But if you think belief is like just making a claim about something and saying, well, I think that happened, then no, that's not belief, and that's not going to save you. But if you understand that belief actually means the application of one's faith by not just understanding that the message is true, that there's truth in the message of the cross, and there's truth in the message of the gospel, but that you actually apply it as a Christian, that you actually live it, that you prove that you actually believe it by living it and being willing, which means you're willing to give up everything in the same way Jesus did. When you can prove that you've done that, then guess what? Then you get the benefit of salvation. Okay, but not before. Not before. No get out of jail free cards. Not even with that one. Not even with that one. You know, you don't get rapture, and you sure as hell don't get a free ticket to salvation just by simply saying, "Oh, I believe that Jesus existed. I believe he died for my sins." Okay, great. Now show me, because he wants you to show you. All right. I mean, he wants you to show him, rather, and it's all over the Gospels. Don't believe me? Read anything Jesus said. Every single thing in there is going to bring you back to the understanding that he expects you to live it, not just believe it. Okay? And in the ancient world, the word belief actually meant to apply it. Okay? All right. So we are at the end of the first segment here. And we're going to come back and start taking your questions about anything. Doesn't even have to be about religion, although I know that tends to be a lot of your interest.
Get our paranormal folks in here.
Yeah. Paranormal questions, anything, metaphysical. Well, even if something's mundane you want to talk about it, I'm more than willing to discuss
whatever.
it. We'll be back after this. Don't go away. Welcome back, everybody, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark. Open lines, open topics, and we have Father Chris from Australia joining us for this segment and the next one, I think. And I see so many questions coming in. 243 viewers right now. Amazing. Thank you all for really, you're unbelievable. We really appreciate this and getting the word out, and we want to spend these next 2 hours enlightening you with your questions. So make sure you ask them on all the platforms. You can also call into the show, 718-362-6380. That's 718-362-6380. Remember to enter PIN number 855-4111. That's 855-4111 to be placed into the queue. We'll bring you on the air. You can also call internationally completely free of charge by dialing up Eye of the Seer on Skype. Okay? But questions in the chat room are fine. We'll be back shortly. Few things put me in a better mood than champagne. There's just something about champagne. I think it's because I associate it with the Christmas season.
You do get a little goofy on some good champagne.
I do. I like it. And I think it's because I typically only drink champagne during Christmas unless I'm celebrating something. It's like I don't really just pop open champagne because I just want to drink champagne on any given night. But I do during Christmas season or Advent season do that. I will just, my main drink for Advent is typically champagne, and it I think it just gives me that Christmas spirit.
Joyous. Yeah.
It does. It's joyous. But I will say this: champagne every other time of year tastes completely different than champagne during the Christmas season. There's just something about Christmas champagne that tastes different. Do you remember that? Do you remember Lucy in the Charlie Brown Christmas special that she says, "I never eat December snowflakes"?
Vaguely. My God, you're talking.
Yeah. Well, there's this whole line where she says, "I never eat December snowflakes." Something about them not being ripe yet, so she only has them in January. And I think about it, it's like, champagne's kind of like that, isn't it? But I actually prefer December champagne.
That's interesting. Well, look, we got questions about dreams, NDEs, guardian angels, shadow figures, and Patricia. It would be really awesome if you could call in. It sounds like you've got a pretty in-depth NDE experience. So call that number and just talk to us. Do not be shy. We're all friends here. If you call, don't just hang up because we don't answer it right away. And know that there's sometimes a delay between what you see on your screen, or if you're listening on the on one of the podcast platforms, there will be a delay between what you hear on the telephone versus what you're seeing or listening to on the broadcast. So just to make sure you turn down your televisions or your cell phones or whatever you're doing, and we'll bring you on and we can talk about it. But don't hang up, okay? Because if you hang up, you'll get thrown back into the queue. We could miss it, and we don't want to miss any of your questions tonight. We also have, as I said, Father Chris is joining us now. How you doing tonight, Father? Hey, Father Chris.
Yeah, I'm sorry for missing the whole first hour. It was a meeting I couldn't avoid in the CBD, and I thought I'd be back, but I wasn't, so I apologize for that.
No worries. You can always go back and listen to it and or watch it. We had some good questions. There was actually some good you would have definitely had something to say about it. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Talked about some good eschatology.
Okay. I love eschatology. That's one of my favorites.
So you don't want to miss it then. You want to go back and watch it.
Okay.
All right. So let's start getting to our first question tonight. So I guess, Jamie, why don't you start with the first one?
I think we have one from Mystic. Got a paranormal question. My brother Miles has been stateside last 3 weeks and was going to collect my brother's ashes at the end of this week. Last night I had an extremely clear dream. And she goes on, she dreamt of Craig, which is her brother who passed, I believe.
Okay.
We chatted and laughed and hugged and said goodbye. As I woke up, I drank some water. I saw a cross with bright light behind it. The time was the same time as when Miles went, early, to collect Craig's ashes. Was this a goodbye from the spirit dream or realm?
It sounds like a typical variation of that. Yes,
It's kind of a closure thing.
When we had Amanda Morris on the show several seasons ago, and we talked about dream interpretation, I mentioned that dreams typically come in 3 flavors. Okay, you have your most common one, which is the defragmentation dream. This is where, the stresses of your day get sort of unpacked in your brain during the night, and the brain sort of files it away and processes it. And a lot of scientists actually believe, researchers, sleep pathology researchers and stuff like that, really actually believe that this is a way of the brain processing trauma, even the basic traumas of the day. We talk about trauma as being like serious things, these once in a lifetime things that kind of change you forever. But trauma can be little minor things too. Even just simply being under constant stress because your job is putting a lot of pressure on you.
We call that chronic stress in law enforcement. You have a bunch of small events over time. It builds up, and that's why a lot of police officers have heart attacks within 5 years of retiring.
That is true, and that is trauma. Make no mistake about it. It is trauma, and it's acute, and we are always going under little traumas throughout the day. Even just like disappointments can be, because the brain responds to it traumatically. Okay. And that typically, the big ones are the ones that get noticed because those are the ones the brain can't unpack so easily in a dream. But the little ones do get unpacked in the dream. And so it's believed that that's sort of like, do you remember those, the old Windows where you had to use defragmentation to get your computer running smoothly?
Yes.
Today it does that automatically, actually.
The defragger.
But you used to have to choose to do it back in Windows 98, I think, and before. And
I always thought it was an odd thing to have to choose to do. It's
I know. Should I be doing this all the time?
You want to choose to do this thing, that otherwise your computer won't work.
You want to know why?
Yeah, okay.
You want to know why? You had to choose it because you couldn't, the computers of that time did not have the processing power to be able to do that and everything else you were doing. Now they do. So now it can kind of do it in the background, and you won't even notice the difference. But back in those days, it was a premium, to have all that processing power. So you had to sort of like choose to do it and then walk away and just leave it there for like 5 hours while it finished, depending upon how much was on your hard drive, which typically my computers were stacked to as far as they could go.
Yeah, you get up in the morning. Sorry, we're sounding like old men now, but we're older than the internet.
I'm older than both of you, hush.
I know, but you get up in the morning, you get to your computer, and you go, I meant to put it on defrag before I went to bed last night.
Yeah, so. I remember those days.
I remember those days too.
Yeah, I remember
back in 2002 when it was things were better back then.
When I was a kid, you had to defrag. You had to choose to defrag your computer.
When I was a kid, we didn't have computers.
But anyway, that's a defragmentation.
If you tell that to youth of today, they'd never believe you.
They'd never believe it. No.
But that's a Monty Python reference for those that don't.
Right. But no, that defragmentation dream is the common one. So most of the data in your dream is typically from that, and most of science will kind of see it that way. It's sort of a way of the brain sort of resetting itself to prepare itself for returning to the state of being awake. Then there is the prophetic dream, and the prophetic dream is, or I should say, the more supernatural dream is, and it's also related to sort of a dream where there's like a spiritual message. Okay, this is the second kind, and this is far more rare, but you know it when you have it. Because these are the dreams where you wake up and you almost feel like waking up is less real than the dream you just had.
Yeah.
And
it takes you a minute to collect yourself.
It does.
Yeah.
And
you don't know where you're at.
They typically leave you with a feeling you can't shake for the rest of the day.
Right.
And so these, you know them when you see them. And those are the ones that tend to be like I said, less common. It's they happen, but they don't happen terribly often that you notice them. And some people don't get them at all. Some people have never had one, so they don't even know what I'm talking about when I say it. But that would be the second kind. And then the third kind of dream is the this is the one where you have sort of a medium type experience where you are connecting with spiritual forces, usually the spirits of the dead. And it is in the waking state where our brain is operating at a frequency that makes it more conducive to communicating with the dead. And it is very, 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 very common when a person has recently died, a person who is close to you, to dream of them within a time frame of a few weeks of their death, where they come to you and there's some kind of goodbye exchange.
Right.
And then you never have that dream again. And this is usually in my work a very good sign, because it means that they have truly crossed over.
It is the closure.
It is closure.
Yeah.
So this is a very good sign. And I would say that I can't say with certainty, because the problem with that is that if a person's recently died, that's also traumatic, and that can sometimes trigger a trauma dream, but typically not the kind of dream where there is an exchange of goodbye. That is unique to this kind of dream in my experience. So I would say, yes, it was absolutely a connection from the past, and or a connection with the dead, and that you truly did have an experience. I had one myself with my grandmother that was exactly like that. And it was something that, again, it when you experience it. And this was one of those times. Calling in from the 805 area code in California. Hello, you are on the air.
Hello.
Let's try that again.
Could that be Patricia?
It might be.
With a California area code?
Hello?
You're pausing a bit even on the Zoom connection.
Am I?
Okay.
I'm not showing any problems.
Mystic put buffering in YouTube, so I don't know.
Huh. I'm not seeing any is anybody else out there in the chat having issues with buffering? Levi or Tracy, if you could let me know if you're seeing it within the local connection. I'm curious, because I'm seeing a solid connection on my end. So I'm wondering if it's something that's going on with more of the international. But 805, are you there? I have you on.
I know Patricia was going to call in. She's in Tennessee, but she may have a cell phone out of
California. 805. Going once. Going twice.
All right.
Okay. Well, try again later.
Try it again.
We'll try again later. Okay. Let me actually reset this and see let me do this. I'm going to try resetting this, because sometimes that particular application likes to give me all sorts of trouble, and yet they're gone now. So I wonder if they hung up and it was just a ghost on my screen. So call back 805 if you're trying to call. We'll give that another go. Okay. Actually, hang on a second.
Okay.
We are absolutely disconnected from that's what's going on here. I'm now disconnected from the phone disconnected.
I see.
So that's part of the issue. I'll try to get the phones back up. In the meantime, let's get to our next question.
Yeah.
So, Brandon, why don't you take the next one that you saw?
So the next question I saw comes from Helena. She asks, are guardian angels family members, actual angels, or something else? How do they help you in your everyday life?
Okay, they are absolutely not family members. They are actual angels, and the church's teaching on them is that they are the lowest choir of angel, which is the angels. They're the closest thing to us, right? And so they interact with us on a very human level, to the point that they can even assume in limited form human qualities where you might not even know you're interacting with an angel or a guardian angel. The second part of that question was, how do they help us? Was that what I heard?
Yes. How do they help you in your everyday life?
Well, I mean, their role is to help carry out God's will in your life, and to help you carry out God's will. So part of their role is protective. Okay, so if, for example, you are, you come into some kind of dangerous situation, and it's not your time yet, they could very well intervene and make sure that you survive whatever that particular event happens to be.
That's happened to me multiple times.
It's happened to me for sure. I think I've talked about my drowning experience once, and it was very similar to your near-death experience. I want to say maybe about... my goodness, I was about maybe 10 or 11. And I had been invited to go to Vermont with one of my third cousins, who was about the same age as me. And he was kind of like a good son. Remember the show The Good Son with Macaulay Culkin? And
so he was psychotic
a little
and murderous?
Yes. And so there was this platform that you could swim out to, and it was off a river. And the river, there was a little bay that was safe to swim in, but if you went past a certain point, you would get swept away in the current. And you could literally get lost, right? And so there was a platform you could swim out to halfway in the bay. And so we were out, and you go out there and you jump in because it was deep, right? And I jumped off this platform, and we were swimming back and jumping off and swimming back, and he comes in over and he says, "Hey, let me show you this." So we jump off, and he grabs me and he pulls me underneath the platform, and I couldn't find my way back up because it's very murky water and it's a very large platform, and he just had pulled me underneath this thing, and I could not for the life of me find my way back up. So I start struggling. And I remember the feeling where it's like I can't hold my breath anymore because there was literally no pocket of air underneath this thing. It was like, you had the surface completely underneath the water. So I was under the water the whole time. And I remember thinking there's just no way that I can continue to do this. And I remember inhaling and taking in all the water. And you think it would have been like this horrible feeling. It was actually kind of peaceful, at least as I recall it. I mean, certainly... I don't think of drowning as being a peaceful thing, but this was. And I immediately started seeing flashes of light. And the next thing I knew, I felt an arm pull me up. Yeah. Just like what you saw, what you felt in your near death. And the next thing I saw, I was on top of the platform, and nobody was acting strangely. Nobody was like, "Are you okay?" And so I said, "Well, who saved me? Who pulled me up?" And they were like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "I was stuck under there. I was drowning." And they said, "I didn't see anybody." And I'm convinced to this day that was my guardian angel that protected me in that particular moment, because I still had work to do. Clearly, I'm doing this right now, aren't I? And I thought that was certain death but I mean, it was definitive. I saw light. I saw an arm pull me, and the arm was luminous. And the next thing I knew, I was safe on top of the platform, not even coughing up water. It was almost as if the entire inhaling of the water never even happened. So it was truly an interesting experience. So that's what angels do. I mean, they do other things as well. I'm still trying to get connected to the phone lines. For some reason, they're not working, and I don't know what's going on, which is the worst show for this to happen. But Father Chris, could you can you think of any other way in which, while I work on this, could you think of any other way in which guardian angels help us?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to emphasize the point you made that they're not family members. We often refer to our family members. Oh, now they're an angel. I know we've said this on the show before, but some people might be first time listening. Angels are a different order of creation, so
it's comforting, but it's not true.
So our family members don't become angels. In fact, we hope they become saints. That's what people in heaven are called. And of course, we know the saints that are famous, that we have dates for, like St. Patrick and what have you, but there are more saints in heaven that we don't know. And so that's the hope. So they're not family members, but in a way, they're closer to you than family members, because angels have far superior intellects to us. And obviously they're in the nearer presence of God. And so...
he throws up.
It's
one of those nights.
It is.
Yeah, but there's also the mainstream is that maybe the that intervention happened in a dramatic way, but there's just the constant intervention of angels in our lives. The angels our guardian angel is always praying for us, wishing the best for us, going before us into battle, and we'll never really know what our guardian angel has done to us, and maybe we'll never know, but we certainly won't see more than the.
Well, I've seen.
I don't think this freezing is on our end. I think this is something going on your side. Father Chris, you keep freezing.
Okay. All right. I'll reboot and come back.
Okay. In the meantime, we have our phone lines back up, and I'm going to bring 805 on the air, hopefully, from California. Hello, you're on the air. California, I can hear myself. Are you there?
Is this Patricia?
Can you hear me?
We can.
There you are. Hey, girl.
Is this Patricia?
Patricia.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Lord.
Oh, hold on.
Yes.
There you are.
You are on.
Yeah.
Thank God. She's got a good story.
Oh, great. I can't wait to hear it.
Okay. Hi, Bishop. Hi, Jamie.
Hey.
Hello.
Okay. I had a question. I actually had emailed this to the Nicolaitan website.
Okay.
All right. Let's hear it.
Okay. I can't hear you on my phone.
You can't hear. Really?
The TV.
Let me try.
You are now muted.
Let me try resetting this.
Are you able to talk to me through the phone?
We can hear you, ma'am.
We
You
can.
are now unmuted.
Okay. Can you hear us through the phone now?
Sweet baby Jesus.
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
It's just one of those nights, I guess.
I can't hear you through the phone.
That is very strange. We've never had that happen before,
No,
have we?
we haven't.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe Satan's just like, you ain't going to ask this question.
So let's
gremlins
do
in the
this,
wire.
because I know there's probably like a 10-second delay before you actually hear me on the broadcast. Go ahead and just tell us the story, and then when you're done, we'll just mute you, and then I'll answer on the air. How about that? We got to wait for her to get the message.
Are we on dial-up?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. When I was 9, I was hit by a fast-moving car on a highway. Okay, that happened. And just fast forward 30 or so years later, and I'm having dinner with my dad and his new wife, and he brought that up. Hey, Chris was hit by a car. And I looked at him because I'm a registered nurse now and a parent, but I said, yeah, Dad, why did you move me? And he said, he just went pale. And he said, how do you know I moved you? And I said, I know exactly where you moved me. You put me in the living room, and I explained to him where my head and feet were in terms of being placed on the couch. Well, this is where the experience comes in. Now, I rise out of my body, and I'm looking down. Above the couch, we had these, back in the 70s, they have the shadow boxes with the mirrors in them. And I remember looking in the mirror, and I don't really, it didn't dawn on me that I didn't see me in the mirror, but I was down there, and I started floating through the kitchen. We had like a breakfast nook with a bar stool and cabinets, and I said, oh, that's going to be really cool because I'm 9 and I'm going to fly right through there. And I'm flying right through there to the kitchen window, which is where the light was. Okay.
I think Patricia, you can hear us now on there, right? Can you hear us now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, I think I fixed it. Okay, so we're good. So we can talk now. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Copy, but I can hear you.
Great.
Anyways, it isn't so much of what I did in the experience. It was the way that I felt, and I have never felt a love so encompassing than I did that day. That love, and I'm 9, so I mean, I was raised Baptist, so I was already afraid to go into hell. But
right.
That love was not. It's not a feeling. It's a state of being.
Mm-hmm.
It's a state of being.
Yep.
It's in every cell of your body, and it's not a euphoria. It is a contentment.
Right.
All right. So that was my experience. I stopped short of making it through the window, and I recall waking up briefly in the ambulance, and then I really don't remember a whole lot after that. So my question is this.
Okay.
Since being a nurse and I not having sort of a telemetry strip that I flatlined, but still having this experience, do you recommend hypnosis regression?
I have reservations about it, not because I think it's like spiritually dangerous or anything, but that it is such a psychological process that's based on suggestion that we can very easily be infused with false memories if the hypnotist isn't really skilled at preventing that from happening, even to the point that we can generate from ourselves a false memory this way. So I think have never been a huge fan of like past life regression therapy with hypnosis for that very reason, that it's been proven that you can give anybody a false memory with hypnosis, assuming they're susceptible enough and willing enough to go under hypnosis and listen to whatever you tell them to do. And so when a person is, I guess, vulnerable, because, typically people don't go to hypnotists for spiritual or psychological reasons unless they're looking for some kind of help, which is automatically a vulnerable position. They're going to naturally be a little bit more open to suggestion on the virtue of wanting to get answers. Right. And so I can't say with any certainty that you would get anything more accurate than a dream, or having a dream about it, because in a way, the brain can manufacture and fabricate all sorts of concepts or wishes out of hypnosis too. I don't think it's half as valuable as a lot of hypnotists want to make it out to be. Now, I know we've had people on this show that have, utilize it and do utilize it and find value in it. And I'm not saying there's not necessarily value in it, but I think really what it's more useful for is implanting suggestions to overcome certain things. Like if you have anxiety, going for hypnotherapy to be taught various prompts to eliminate that anxiety. Smoking. I know there's been some success with people that are chain smokers that have gone for hypnotherapy, and they're given suggestions to stop smoking, and they find that when they go through these sessions, it helps them to eventually quit. I think it's more useful for that, less useful for recalling memories, because the brain is a remarkable thing, and it's used to living in a dream state most of the time anyway. Even when you're going through your waking times, even when you're at work, when you're driving, I guarantee you it's constantly drifting into daydreams. How often have you been driving and then all of a sudden you arrive at your destination?
Yeah, you're like, dear God, how did I get here?
How'd you get there? That happens to all of us. And it doesn't mean you're driving unsafe. It just means that, a part of your brain is drifting into a semi-dream state. And this is very similar, if not identical, to the hypnotic state. So hypnosis just basically puts you into the dream state, which does not necessarily mean that you're more able to recall memories or have a more definitive spiritual encounter that is tangibly true. So I would say that my personal opinion, I'm not trying to discourage you from doing it. I just would say, since you asked me, that I don't personally think there's a lot of value in it for what you're describing in that particular situation.
As a NDE person myself, there's things that happen during my NDE that there's a lot of gaps. And yeah, I would like answers to it, but sometimes your subconscious is helping you out by not remembering certain details. I'm afraid that if I did a regression in reference to that subject, I'm afraid that I would relive things that I don't remember that were absolutely horrifying, because when I came out of my NDE, my whole life changed. And that's just on the stuff I remember. But there's little snippets that come into my memory every once in a while, and I don't know all of it, but just enough of it that scares the shit out of me. But I'm afraid that I wouldn't want to know all the details. So sometimes that's best just to take the experience and with what you have, and just remember that it was unique and special, and some things you just don't need to know. That
alone is also a kind of a lead into what I was saying, in the sense that because there were things in those experiences that scare you and things that you can't remember. Mm-hmm. Whatever is really lost to your memory, your brain will manufacture in hypnosis.
Yeah, so you can get an
answer. And so it will take your fear response, and then it will create a story around that could probably be even more terrifying than what really happened.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that you have to be mindful of. I'm not saying that you can't have a valuable experience with it, but understand that hypnosis is not the absolute thing that people make it out to be. It does have limitations, and it really is just basically playing with the dream states of the brain, the natural ability of the brain to go into these dream states, which are hypnagogic states. And I don't know how useful that is for retracting information or acquiring information in that particular sense. So, I mean, you can try it. I don't know. I wouldn't spend a whole lot of money doing it, though. I mean, if you're if you're trying to sign up with someone that wants to charge you like $300 a session, I'd say I think you could spend your money somewhere else much more usefully than that.
She should come back when Regan's on again.
Regan is an advocate, I think, of past life regression, hypnosis, and I mean, he claims to have some success with it. I have my reservations about it. I feel that it's just too close to the dream state, and I know how the brain works, and I know how hypnosis works. I can do hypnosis. I mean, I've hypnotized people before, and you can make them do all sorts of crazy things or believe any sorts of thing very easily. So, Father Chris, do you have any thoughts on it? From I know you're sort of the resident rationalist in the room, so
gotta have at least
not
one.
Not the materialist.
Not the materialist. Just a rationalist.
Not the materialist. I'm the Thomist. I think what my interaction with hypnotherapy used to do this is not to do with spiritual matters, but with legal matters. And so I guess what I would say is the literature I have read, and I've read it actually quite extensively. I mean, I'm talking about people that have hypnotherapy and then say, "Oh, actually, I was abused," and next thing someone's getting arrested.
Yeah.
And I think that is a terrible idea. Because of everything you've just said. So all I'd say is I think, look, I don't fear any of these things. All these things are useful tools in terms of, I inspired by you, went and looked at my natal chart, which we can talk about if you want. I don't fear the. Apparently, I'm a complete train wreck. Just for the viewers.
Your chart is a mess. If the time that you gave me is correct, your chart's a mess. But I don't want to interrupt you, so go ahead.
I'm pretty sure it is. I'm pretty sure. No, well, but it relates to that, right? So what I would say is, all these things are kind of useful tools of how to explore how we think or reflect on things. But we should neither see them as fatalistic, predetermined, there's nothing you can do to change your life. That's not right. And we shouldn't make major life decisions based upon them. So I
think if you want to go have fun, Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to go have fun and maybe see what you might be able to experience with it.
Yeah. But also, I'm very naturally resistant to having somebody suggest something to me in a hypnotic state.
Have you ever tried to be hypnotized? Is it not possible for you?
The closest I've come to it is, going to see a theatre show hypnotist who
I don't think we could do it. I don't think I could do it.
Well, they bring people out of the audience, right? So
yeah,
they're the act. And so, and obviously, like, there's things they get you to do, obviously, to see who's most suggestible, I suspect. And I, my hands didn't shake or, so I suspect I'm quite bloody minded and so that might be a very English term. That's not a rude word where I'm from. I might be quite, so I'd be open to being hypnotized, but I want to know who it was that was hypnotizing. It
was, yeah, sure, yeah. So I hope that gives an answer, and I think ultimately, it's up to you. I mean, what you want to do with it. But I think the internet is definitely having weird behavior, but it's not on our end, because I have a monitor that's constantly checking.
Yeah, we're good to go.
And we are as solid as we can. So maybe there's just some weird internet issues out there in general, and people are having some buffering. But it's not on our end. We got a solid connection here. Okay, what is our next question, Jamie? And we'll go with Jamie and Brandon because Father Chris wasn't here for all of it. So I want to make sure we get the questions that came in. From
April's got a question we answer quite often, but it's a question that everybody always has. She would like to know what you think shadow figures are.
That is a question we get a lot. Yeah. And I would say the answer hasn't changed, but for those that might be new to the question, we are almost at 300 viewers right now, by the way.
Holy moly.
Almost at 300.
Thanks, y'all.
I want to thank you all for tuning in with us tonight, and we appreciate all of you. And remember, every Tuesday evening when in season, we do this show at 8 p.m. Eastern. So you're always welcome to join us. Shadow people. Okay. My opinion of it differs from, I think, the mainstream paranormal community on this. In my experience, which is quite extensive, by the way. I mean, I was doing paranormal investigation before it was ever a thing.
Before it was cool.
Before it was a television show. I was doing it long time ago. And I can tell you, in my vast experience, any spirit of any kind can manifest as a shadow, and it is a typical manifestation or a typical apparition. It is the most common form of apparition because it takes a lot of energy to manifest at all. So typically the details of a person's self-concept that would sometimes come through in an apparition, there's just not enough energy there to produce that, or even enough skill to produce that. And so the best that they can manifest is a silhouette kind of image. It doesn't have any form, and it will look like a shadow person. So that is a thing that any kind of spirit can produce. Demons can materialize this way. Elementals can materialize this way, as well as wrathful spirits or just benign spirits of the dead. This is just a typical manifestation of typical apparition response. So I don't find shadow people to be anything more significant than any other kind of paranormal thing, because I've encountered this, and I've encountered this in all of those various contexts. I've seen demons manifest this way. I've seen just benign spirits manifest this way, and they look the same. And sometimes that's the best that they can do. And remember, just because something is a demon doesn't mean that it has all the supreme power of the divine to do whatever it wants. In many cases, it doesn't have this. And I've said to you before, remember, demons only have the power you give it. So if you're not giving it a lot of power, then maybe a shadow's all it's going to be able to present to you, which is good. You don't want it to do more than that. But anyway, no, shadow people, no big deal, and not something to be concerned about. It doesn't mean it's dark and malevolent because it's a shadow person. The only thing I will say does not appear as a shadow person is an angel, like a true angel, not a fallen angel, but an angel. They will always manifest as a luminosity of some kind, or as a person, like we talked about. The guardian angels can sometimes actually assume for a short time a material form that appears to be a person, but they get it wrong. There's always something that's off about them. And we've discussed that many times in the past as well.
Yeah.
They're awkward.
That's where the saying comes from, isn't it? You know, that you should always welcome strangers lest they be angels in disguise.
Yes,
right.
Exactly. And it's true because they can. God permits them to have that ability. I don't think it's a natural ability of an angel to do. I think that's God permitting this for, the various purpose of what they're here to help us accomplish. But fallen angels don't seem to have that kind of tangibility ability because God doesn't permit it for them. And so typically a demon or a fallen angel is always going to appear as a spiritual manifestation. And if they're only able to manifest as a shadow figure, then you're doing something right, because that means they don't have a whole lot of energy. And so I think I see shadow people as good things, but I know the entire paranormal community disagrees with me on that, but hey, to each its own. I mean, I can only share with you my own personal experience, and I think I've probably done a whole lot more investigating than a lot of people that are in the paranormal field. So I'm content with my assessment there. All right, Brandon, what's our next one?
So this is another question that's asked a lot, but I think it's still really good, and you have a good analogy for it. Helena asks, what is the difference between spirits and souls?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she had a question up thread about, do pets have souls? And I told her they have spirits, not souls.
Okay.
I know that's something that a lot of people, especially us animal lovers, ask.
Yeah, we can talk about that for sure. Because the next question usually is, do pets go to heaven? And my answer to that is, why do you think they want to? But we'll explain what I mean by that. Okay. So here we go. Spirits and souls. Now, you have to understand that when you get back to the original Greek, all right, the word that we derive from spirit actually is closer to mind. Okay. And the word that we derive from soul is closer to pneuma, right? And that is
pneuma, breath is spirit.
So
spirit.
That's spirit. Pneuma is spirit. Yeah. I'm getting dyslexic on this one now. And mind.
It's the other way around.
Yeah, the other way around. I did it in reverse. No, I'm dyslexic me. Yeah. So spirit. That kind of besides the point though. So what I bring it up only to say that all throughout history we have used them interchangeably. And different models apply them in different ways. And even in scripture, they can be used in different ways. The Greek helps us a little bit, but not enough to say that we have a definite answer as to what it is. So a lot of times people will just use spirit and soul interchangeably. I, in my esoteric mysticism model, decided to come up with a definitive category. So that when I'm talking to my students and my students are talking to me, we know what we're talking about when we say these words. So the semantics only matter. So I'm going to give you what I teach my students. Okay. Ultimately, you can interchange these if you prefer. There are models, even Christian models, that do. But I like this one because I follow a particular esoteric model that works for the rest of what I teach my students. So I keep to this one. So what I teach is you have the physical body, okay, which is the one right? The part you can touch. And then you have the incorporeal part. So this is the corporeal part, the body, the physical, and then the incorporeal part of your body, which is really your mind. I call that the spirit. I call that is the incorporeal nature. Okay, it's just as much a part of you as the body, but it is not physical. And then that which animates us into existence. In other words, otherwise you just have matter, right? You have a body and you have a mind, but it can't do anything until it's been animated by the divine, by the presence of God within us. And that is truly the soul in my model. Now, there are Christian models, like I said, that reverse that. And when you, depending upon how you apply the Greek, it could be the other way around. So you have to understand that about this. So I'm not teaching a definitive thing on this. I'm just saying that when you hear me talk about spirits and souls, I'm using it in this context so that the semantics are clear. But it is so interchangeable at this point that, you really just have to clarify how you want to use it.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's entirely genre specific.
It is.
So, if you're going to talk to a Protestant, for example, about the immortality of the soul versus the resurrection of the body, then you're using soul in the sense of, well, the Greek understanding of the word soul, really, But the reason that it's so difficult to distinguish these things is because, classic Thomistic Christian teaching is that we are embodied souls.
Correct. And that's,
in other words, they're impossible to separate because, we're embodied souls. And even in the future glory, the eschatological vision of being in heaven, we will be embodied souls still. So
what Father Chris is talking about here is the application of the reverse, because remember, the Greek word for soul is psyche, which is where we get the word psychology. So in the ancient perspective, the soul was the mind. The soul was the mind. And the spirit is the pneuma. That's the breath that animates. But in my model, I've reversed those outside of the Greek original concepts. And the reason for that is that when people refer to going to heaven, the typical thing is that the soul goes to heaven. We don't really hear the spirit going to heaven. We hear the soul goes to heaven. And so the reason that I like to apply that the breath of God, even though the Greek would assume that it's the spirit, I would say that it is more as the modern person understands the soul to be. And that's why I've changed the definitions for my students. But I make it clear that the Greek is the opposite and that we have a reason for using different semantics for this. So regardless, how I have applied it is that I also, in esoteric mysticism, say that it's actually the opposite of what the Christian church teaches, what Father Chris just said, that we are embodied spirits, okay, or souls, right? I would say it's the other way around, that the soul projects the body, and the soul projects the mind, and the mind projects the body. The complete reverse.
And actually, in fairness, that's exactly what the eschatological vision is. That we'll have this perfect body that actually it reflects our soul, right?
Yes, exactly. So I would say that for the purposes of what I teach in esoteric mysticism, that model makes more sense. But it's suffice it to say that there is an incorporeal nature, whether you want to call that one the soul or the spirit, is depending upon which model you use. But both models understand the same principles. They just have different words for them. So we all know the only one that's the same is the body, the corporeal. The incorporeal is the mind. And then the animation of the divine life that lives within us is either soul or spirit, whichever model you're using. In my model, I use that one for the soul, but I see it as a projection. So I would say that bodies don't have soul. People don't have souls. Souls have people.
Yeah.
Okay? The complete reverse of what we're used to thinking.
Yeah, bodies don't have souls. Souls have bodies.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would not say that you're a spiritual being having a physical experience. I would say that your concept is a spiritual being thinking it's having a spiritual experience that is an actual spiritual experience that it doesn't even know it's having. And that's because we're largely ignorant to the workings of the spirit. But I would say that another reason that I use this model is that in exorcism ministry, a common concern that people have is that the devil stole their soul. Or they sold their soul to the devil. You can't do it because the soul is, in this context, a divine aspect of God. The devil has no claim to it. So
it's the property of God.
It's the property of God, and if you lose it, it returns to God. You don't, but it does. And that's the part that people don't understand because we think we possess souls. No, the souls possess us.
Right.
All right. And when you lose your soul, because you lose salvation, what you're actually losing is that divine connection. That's what you're losing. That's what salvation preserves, is that you get that connection back and forever. And that is part of the resurrection of the dead, where the spirit and the body return and are reunited with that soul for all eternity, as it was intended to be. But you don't get to keep it unless you actually cultivate the grace to achieve salvation and reach that. So that's kind of how I look at it. Now, when it comes to animals, I would say that if you're using the ancient Greek, then animals have souls, but they don't have spirits. Or if you're using my model, which I think makes more sense again when you're talking about animals, is that animals don't have souls, but they do have spirits. Animals have an incorporeal nature just like we do. They have a mind, and they do have an internal world. You can see it when your animal's sleeping and they're going through, they're running in their sleep and they're chasing things. They're having an incorporeal experience. That's their incorporeal nature, just like you have. All right. And they have their physical body. That's your pet, right? That's what you see. But when they die, they don't have a soul because they don't have the animation of the divine life that is made in the likeness of God. That is something that God made unique to human beings, being made in his image. What is the image of God? It's that soul. It's that divine connection that lives within us and can be taken away, by the way, if we choose not to pursue salvation. And I absolutely say that's a choice. That's not God condemning you, and that's not God punishing you. That's you punishing yourself. You're the only one to blame if you lose your salvation and you lose your soul as a result.
And God is not, waiting to pounce to take it back.
Correct.
Right? No.
Correct. And the other side of the coin.
St. Francis basically said what you've said.
Yes.
Listen, I don't necessarily agree with St. Francis on everything.
On everything.
But he would say, an animal has an animal soul. I actually think your description is way better. But
he loved animals a lot, so he probably was an animal person and wanted to also believe something about them too.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
But also animals didn't commit original sin.
And that's it. And they don't need salvation, nor would they. Nor did Jesus die for their for sins, because they don't commit sins. Animals don't.
That's right.
Don't do moral wrong. They might be part of the fallen world, and so therefore the atrocities of the fallen world will affect them, and they can be participants in it, but not morally. So they don't need salvation, nor would they require it. And we have to also understand that heaven is purely a part of the human experience with the divine. Why do you think your animal would even want that? Now, that doesn't mean that their spiritual nature does not exist or continue on in some form or fashion. It does, because these things are eternal, but not in any kind of ego sense. So what I would say happens, and I'll leave this thought before we go to the next break. I'll leave you with this thought. What I would say happens to animals when they die is that they return to the cosmos. They become absorbed back into the energy of the cosmos, and that energy gets respawned again. And that's exactly what, if you could ask a dog or a cat what they want their afterlife to be, they would tell you that's exactly what they want, because that's what's natural to them. It would not, you've been giving them an unnatural life all their entire existence. All right, that's not their nature to live with you and sleep in a human bed and eat human food and hang out on a human lap. That's us conditioning them through domestication, or in cats' case, because they wanted to.
They only do what they want to do.
That is something we did to them, but their nature is not that. And so I don't think there would be any pet in the world or any animal in the world that would want to live a human heaven. They would want to return to their base nature, which is ultimately what is natural to them. And they understand that, which is why they don't really see death the same way we do. In fact, most animals, when they're dying, will go off on their own and just hide somewhere, and it naturally happens. Human beings are the ones that get terrified because they can see the impending process and they worry about their mortality. Animals don't worry about their mortality. They understand they're part of a natural cycle, and they want to continue to be part of that natural cycle because that's what's natural to them. Right. And I think that's the hard part for pet lovers to understand. But they don't dissipate into nothingness. They simply become part of of the natural, or part of the cosmos, both spiritual and physical, I guess. All right, we'll be back after this and take more of your questions. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. I'm seeing 311 viewers tonight. Fantastic across all platforms. We really thank you for tuning in, and we're taking all of your questions. So it's really your show. It's a good one to tune into. And any questions you have, we can take in any of the various chats around the internet, anywhere that you're watching the show. And also, you can call into the show. We always prefer that. That's 718-362-6380. Our phone lines are now fixed, by the way. 718-362-6380. Remember to enter PIN number 855-4111 to be placed into the queue. That's 855-4111. And international, you can call us free on Skype. Just dial Eye of the Seer, EYEOFTHESEER, and we'll bring you on. More questions, more of your questions when we return. Reflecting back on what Father Chris was saying about Thomas Aquinas and the animal thing, I kind of ran out of time and I didn't really finish all of my thoughts on that question about do animals have souls. I really want to clarify a few things that are important about this to understand. And there's another question on YouTube from Divine Diamond about what do you think about animal spirit guides. That's sort of related to what I'm about to say. So let's finish up the question by saying this and we'll go to more questions. Essentially, while it is true what I said, that they would have no desire for a human heaven, and they would want more of the natural process that they would undergo, or what they do undergo, is returning into the cosmic ether, if you will. That is not to say, though, that they completely scatter into the oblivion of whatever that is and beyond our imaginations. When you make a pet, when you make something domestic, part of the domestication process is that you're actually imparting part of your own spiritual nature into them, which is why, if you notice, animals start to look like their owners. This is why, because they actually take on some of their non-corporeal or incorporeal characteristics. Literally, spiritually, they do. And so that energy gets reabsorbed back into the owner. So you actually carry around spiritually part of your pets. They do continue to stay with you in that form. And here's the nice part for the animal lovers who don't like the idea of pets not going to heaven, is that because your salvation encompasses the entirety of your being, that energy gets saved through you. So the church has an easier way, and I think not Thomas Aquinas, I'm sorry, St. Francis, what he meant by animal souls is this, because this is what the church has taught. Okay, one priest I knew had this fabulous question that he answered. Somebody said, animals don't have souls, they don't need salvation. Jesus didn't die for animals, so they don't need. What happens here? All right, they don't go to heaven because heaven's a human experience, right? Okay, well. There's an interesting part of this, because heaven is also the full capacity of a person's happiness. And what if a person's happiness requires, in their conceptualization, the presence or the reality of that animal? What if something about that must be taken with them in order for that happiness to be complete? And so the priest said, of course, he's talking in very human terms here, and we're not exactly getting metaphysical about this. We're trying to give a comforting theological answer. That is true, but keeping it simple enough that anybody can understand it. If a person's happiness in the kingdom of heaven, in order to be complete, which has to be for it to be perfect, heaven is perfect, therefore happiness must be perfect. And if their pet needs to be present for that, then heaven produces it. That the reality, it would come from the energy that has always been part of you in the first place. Because the only part of your pet that you really care about is the part of your own soul that you gave it, the part of your own spiritual nature that you passed into it, that created part of its domestication and its bond with you. And that does continue to exist. And if you preserve it in your own salvation, it stays with you. That is true. And I think that's what actually St. Francis was saying about animal souls to some degree. Of course, he was probably talking more about wild animals too, but and that wouldn't.
I think though you have to extend out that thinking though. So like I say, I mean, I'm not speaking with any definitive teaching on this, but
right.
you have to extend out that thinking, because how much more would it be true to say, somebody who you loved very much in this life, but who not only didn't come to faith, but positively rejected God, and let's say, for argument's sake, they end up in hell. So they're in hell, or they're annihilated, whichever way you want to look at it.
You're learning well, Father. You've been around me too long.
They get Thanos.
and you're in heaven because you responded to Christ, and not that you're perfect, but you get to heaven. How could heaven be heaven for you if the person you love so much has been annihilated or is in hell? Now, so you have to extend that thinking out. I mean,
I can answer that.
Teaching on this,
I can answer that.
Well, one of the orthodox teachings on that is to say, perhaps God erases that memory in you.
And that's you get it. See, you're right. You're right on track, Father, because that's part of the annihilation thing, and that's why I say hell has to be annihilation. It can't be anything other than annihilation. And by annihilation, we're not just talking about no longer existing. You're talking about never having existed. It's as if the entirety of that particular ego reality never occurred in the first place, and it would have to be. That's the only compassionate thing to do, and a God of love could only ever do that. I mean, it would be the only way to deal with it. In my mind, I don't think there's any way that it could ever go any other way. So there's also the idea that in some sense that the perfection of heaven also passes into the perfection of understanding. And so therefore we would, I think, have more of the understanding God has on this and not feel like human beings do in that respect. Animals are a little different in this sense because, well, there is no moral obligation there. And like I said, the part that we love in them is really the part that we put there. It's really, animals are kind of a self-love. It really is in a lot of ways. It's a reflection of one's own nature. It's that what we really get out of it is really kind of the part that we put into it.
And again, I mean, to go back to eschatology, we also believe that God will bring in a new heaven and a new earth.
Which could have animals.
And to appeal to I think it's Daniel, isn't it? The lion will lie down with the lamb.
Yes.
So like you say, I mean, animals have to deal with the effects of original sin, as in the lion has to hunt, its prey and eat it.
Yes.
But in the new heaven and the new earth, that won't be necessary.
Which implies that animals are there in a perfected state too, that they're not subject to the fallen world. Yeah.
So there's a biblical basis for saying, no, once the perfection of the new heaven and the new earth is made by.
No, we're losing Father Chris again. You're freezing up again, Father. I don't know what's going on.
I think
just when he's on a roll.
Yeah, just when he was on a roll too. He's back.
Yeah, I'm back now.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
The Bible tells us it must involve animals.
And I think that we can find comfort in that, because I would say that perhaps the reason, Jesus didn't die for animals. He died for man. Animals don't need salvation. They didn't fall from grace. Anything that they experience now as a result of the fallen world is actually our fault. They've experienced death because of us. Because it corrupted the entirety of creation, not just our natures, but all of creation is corrupted and is subject to the same consequences now. So all things die, even plants, right? So the reality here is that if animals get reabsorbed into the cosmos in their natural cycles, then it could stand to reason that when the new heaven and the new earth are reconstituted or reestablished, you could say, in their perfected states, that energy respawns in a perfected way, and that there is some semblance of those animals returning, and in a sense, the animals go to heaven. So it depends on how you look at it. I just want to make sure that we don't have a kindergarten view of this, and which gets us to the question of divine diamond, about spiritual or spirit guides, or animal spirit guides rather. And this is from, of course, shamanism and particularly Native American spirituality. But it's also, you find it in Africa, you find it in the Caribbean, you find it even in some of the tribes of any shamanic culture, the tribes of South America, I was going to say, but any shamanic culture would have an understanding of spirit guides. And this is exactly that. Okay, this is that energy. It is animal energy, but it's the incorporeal part of them, which does persist, does get reabsorbed into the cosmos and then can form into various manifestations that can aid people. I've experienced this directly, and my viewers did too when we were in Reno, Lake Tahoe. Actually, Lake Tahoe was where we were.
Was something.
And I was. We're getting all sorts of technical things right now. I'm sorry about that. Where I was performing a ritual that was there to help to connect with a particular type of spirit that was a high level spirit influencing this family out there that was having difficulties with it. And one of the things that I did was a very shamanic practice where I scattered various things. And
I started off with a tobacco ceremony too.
And that was what it was. I scattered tobacco.
Yeah.
And as an offering to make the connection to this particular spirit so that we could have a conversation about what was going on in this family's home. And suddenly all of these birds appeared out of nowhere.
Blackbirds,
All these blackbirds just came and surrounded me in the trees. And then when I finished the ritual, they flew down right in front of me and took up all the tobacco.
Yep, sure
and
did.
flew off.
Sure did.
That is a physical connection to this kind of spiritual guide energy, animal spiritual guide. Animals are very, very powerful and very connected to us. Okay. In some ways, they're almost spiritually superior right now because their spiritual natures are not fallen like ours
They can
are.
teach us how to tame our egos.
Correct. And because they don't have the ego.
My favorite description of that. I think I've fixed the problem. By the way, I've gone off my Wi-Fi. My favorite description of that is Fulton Sheen. You know, because he draws a distinction between man's conscience and animals, and he says, you know, you never saw a pig with an Oedipus complex.
Right.
It's so true. It's so true. Even the higher mammals, the higher animals don't seem to have that kind of the moral conundrums that human beings find themselves falling into constantly.
No, we only have it because we have the moral conscience of God.
Yeah. And
that's
it's fallen
and
it's broken
to a higher standard.
Yeah.
And it's broken.
And it's broken. Yeah. So it screws up constantly. We have too much power and, you know, too much power contained in a very broken state. All right, let's, Brandon, what's our next question? I spent a lot of time on that one.
Gotta be the hot chocolate one.
Oh, the hot chocolate. Okay. All right. Somebody asked about my hot chocolate recipe. I can give it very quickly. Although, I mean, we're getting into the warmer months here for us. For Father Chris, this might be good for you.
I drink
you're
your
getting
hot
colder,
chocolate
right?
any time of the year.
But yeah, I guess you could if it, you know, and it's actually kind of cold out there right now. So it's about 30 degrees.
It's still in the 30s at the moment.
Okay.
So
Same here.
Sorry,
So we share the same weather right now. Okay, hot chocolate. All right, this is what I do. All right, so I have a little tradition. When I go to another island or country in the Caribbean, I try to bring back a single origin chocolate from that the country, and that becomes part of my hot cocoa recipe for the new Christmas season. The little thing I do now. And so what I try to do is I try to get 2 or 3 single origin chocolates, all right, pure cocoa, all right, pure cocoa. I'll sometimes get one of the chocolates I try to do that's high in cocoa butter because I do like a slightly creamier, thicker, richer chocolate. So, but I don't want too much of it. So you definitely don't want to put like pure cocoa butter in there or something. That'll ruin it. You just want a cocoa that has a higher content of cocoa butter and some single origin chocolates. And then I sprinkle a little bit of chili pepper into that. So overall it's a little over a heaping cup, a quarter of a cup of cocoa. So about maybe 20% more than a quarter of a cup of cocoa. All right. And then I put a half a cup of sugar in with that. And like I said, I sprinkle a little bit of cayenne pepper is what I use. Cayenne pepper, not chili pepper, cayenne pepper. And then I mix that all together. The 3 cocos, the half a cup of sugar and the chili pepper. And then I boil a little over a third of a cup of water, and I pour that in, and then I mix that in, and I cook it on a pan over medium high for about 2 minutes, getting it up there to a fast boil, almost to the point where you're making sort of like a chocolatey caramel. It starts to melt the sugar in, and it becomes thick. Looks like Willy Wonka's little river, but you don't want to fall into it because it'll scald you. You're really, really hot, right? And you mix that up to the point that it boils for about, and keep mixing it so it doesn't stick or burn. You keep mixing it constantly at about medium high. Then at that point, I pour in about a little over 4 cups of milk, whole milk. only whole milk, not skim, not 2%, and by God, not water. You do not use water in cocoa. Anybody who puts water in cocoa, they're insane. You use milk in cocoa, only milk. Okay, so if you're lactose intolerant, you're out of luck. I'm sorry. Get some lactate or something, because
no skim or 1%.
No, you cannot use that. It will not create proper chocolate, hot chocolate. Okay, so milk, and then you mix that in on high until you start to get. You keep mixing it constantly on high because it will start to burn. You bring it just to the point right before it starts to boil. You'll see like a little bit of boiling in the center. That's when you know it's done and it's ready. Okay, that's when you turn it off, and then you pour in a heaping wooden spoons worth of Madagascar vanilla. I infuse my own. I get Madagascar beans. Tahitian's even better, but Tahitian beans are very hard to come by. So Madagascar is fine. Just make sure they're natural, real. I infuse it myself. So if you want to do that ahead of time, you can get yourself some Madagascar beans. You slice them open, and then you put them into basically just pure vodka, and let it sit for about 3 or 4 years, and you're ready to go. Okay, so you're gonna have to start now if you want to do this.
3 or 4 years.
About 3 or 4 years, right? And then, or you can just get a really good high quality vanilla, natural vanilla extract, not the artificial shit that they put in the grocery store. You want the real stuff, not imitation. Okay. And then you one heaping wooden spoons worth of that in there, and you mix that up, and you're good to go. We like using different kinds of marshmallows. So sometimes Tracy will make a candy cane marshmallow, or like a peppermint marshmallow, or sometimes we'll just use just regular marshmallows, whatever you feel like it. But and then that's it. That's the recipe. Okay, Brandon, what's our next one?
So whenever we come to visit, I need to have this hot chocolate.
Oh yeah, it's quite something else.
Dude,
it
it's
really
epic.
is. I'll make a promise to all of you. Okay, when we are back in the Advent, when we're approaching the Advent season, or maybe the first week of Advent, we'll do a special simulcast. Okay, and I'll make it on camera again, since the last time I did it was on Periscope, and I think all those videos were purged, being when Periscope went the way of Twitter. I mean, they've just been trying to destroy that. Well, yeah, I know, exactly. But I'll do that for you guys. Okay, we'll do it again. All right, what's our next question?
I've got one from Helena,
okay,
which is witchcraft real? Can it be used to harm others? How could I protect myself? So
yes, it's real.
It's a revision for our show, but that's a question from probably someone that's not heard us talk about that before.
Yeah, we've talked about it.
We've talked about that. Yes, it's real. Yes, it can be used to harm people. Black magic is a real thing.
It'll also be used to help people.
We deal with it often, but yes, there's white magic too, and it can be used to help people the same way. Magic is just like any other tool, right? It's just like a gun. You can murder people with it. You can hunt with it.
Magic
Depends on what you do. But the way you protect yourself is by having strong spiritual foundations. Okay, so I can guarantee you, a person that has a deep, devoted, sincere and authentic relationship with Christ will never have to worry about coming under a curse from witchcraft. There is no curse that can touch a person that has completely given themselves over to Christ. What gets cursed is the ego. So the stronger your ego, the more vulnerable you are.
And those are usually the people that end up getting
correct
hexes put on them.
Strong egos.
Yeah.
So you don't need to be Christian to fight against this either. You just have to work on keeping your ego in check, because that's what's vulnerable in a curse. Okay, that's what gets affected. The only part of you that can be affected in it. Of course, your ego affects everything else. So if your ego gets contaminated, well, that's when you can get sick and have mental problems and spiritual problems and everything else. But as long as you have control of your ego, then you never have to worry about it. I can tell you right now, there's not a Buddhist monk in the world that has ever had to worry about a curse. Okay, because if they're sincere and they are working to extinguish their egos, they're doing exactly what they would need to do to protect themselves from anything like that. So that's how it's done, and that's how it can be eliminated. So if you're feeling like you're under a curse and you don't have somebody like me that can help you come out from under it, and you don't have an interest in the Christian religion, then your next step is to work on mitigating the effect of your ego. The weaker your ego gets, the weaker the curse will get, and you'll be free of it in no time. Of course, you'll be free of your ego too, which might be good or bad depending upon how you look at it. But I personally think the less ego in our life, the happier we actually tend to be, because the ego is really the source of most of our miseries. So that's how you do it. That's how you take care of it. Very simple. Okay. All right, Brandon, I'm sorry. What's your question?
So this comes from Maribel on Facebook last segment. And it's a really good question. Can I bless my own apartment?
If you are the head of household, the church, if I'm assuming you're asking this as a Christian, okay? If you are the head of household, the church actually you are obligated to carry out or officiate rather at the spiritual responsibilities of your household. So, for example, I know this sounds a little sexist, but it's just the way that the Judeo-Christian tradition evolved. But the father of organic nuclear family, the father is the head of household and is the spiritual head of his family. So he has full authority under the church to bless his wife and children as well as their domicile. If you live by yourself, then that's you. You have that. And even if you rent, you don't have to own the property as long as it is your home. If it's your legal home, then you have the right to bless it. Yes, absolutely. Which is why when we offer blessing kits to people that, give donations to the church, we try to send them a little gift and as a thank you. We send little blessing kits. Of course, I have consecrated the materials in there, so the crucifix is blessed, the salt is exorcised, the water is true holy water, and the oil is blessed as well. You can use that and then perform the blessing of your home. And Marina is actually in the YouTube chat right now. And Marina, I know you have this handy typically. If you do right now, if it's not too much trouble, if you could put it in the chat for people, that would be awesome, because I know you and I have talked about this before. It's on YouTube, and if she puts it up there, I'll read it if I see it. But the thing is that, yes, you have that ability as long as you're head of household. If you're not the head of household, like if you're living with your dad, for example, then he's head of household, have him do it. However, the caveat is, let's say he's not practicing or believing, then it would fall to you. Then you have to pick up the pieces for his sake. And hopefully that's not the case, but this is kind of the way it works. Now, this is not to say that this is a replacement for a sacramental blessing of a priest. That is still a different thing. So it is always a good idea for all Christian households to have a priest have their priest come to their home and give a blessing. That is always a good thing. That is a little different because that is a sacramental blessing in a very particular way and when a priest does it, it's as if Christ himself is doing it in that formal sense. But that does not mitigate the importance of the head of household doing it for themselves as well. Because you should be doing this all the time. You should be blessing your children all the time. That is what any good father should be doing. Of course, the church hardly ever talks about that, but no, that is actually good Christian theology. That's not just me being the esoteric bishop saying weird things. That's what we should be doing, right, Father?
No, that's in every Catholic prayer book. Is the encouragement to do that. So, the other thing I'd say is that practice in churches has not been great on this either. In terms of most Catholic churches, Orthodox churches, would have holy water available in the church all the time.
Yeah,
right.
Obviously, for Catholics, not during Holy Week, or sometimes not during the whole of Lent. That's for a spiritual reason, but so the provision of holy water is important, but also the tradition in terms of the priestly blessing of a house is that in the Western tradition that should be on the Feast of Candlemas every year. Not Candlemas, Epiphany. On the Feast of the Epiphany. Now the Orthodox actually do the same thing, but they talk about theophany. On the Feast of the Epiphany, then chalk and water should be specifically blessed for the blessing of houses, and the clergy really ought to go around every house in their parish or in their ordinary jurisdiction to do that. And it's a beautiful tradition. And Epiphany chalk, when I came to Australia, no one had heard of it. It's like, really? So where
I just think it's fallen off favorite. Part of it is that we don't live in small communities anymore. So that evolved out of a time when people lived in small little towns and everyone knew each other and the priest could walk to every home. It was like that kind of world when this started. And now that we have expansive cities and everything, it's fallen out of practice. But Marina actually
I have to say, my Greek Orthodox priest friend, he goes across, it'd be a geographical area. It'd be huge. He goes to all of his parishioners that are on the list to bless their house.
Sure.
Year.
That's best practice if you can. Marina did put the book in the chat for YouTube. It is the Catholic Household Blessings and Prayer Book. You can find it on Amazon. That's Catholic Household Blessings and Prayer Book. And you can buy it there, and it has an official formal prayer that head of households can use to bless their homes. Okay, Jamie, what's our next question?
Looks like we have one from April. She wanted to know if there are animal ghosts. And we've experienced that numerous times. Because
they do have spirits in my model, okay? Spirits. Remember, my model is a little different than the other, and we have to make sure the semantics are clear. So they have an incorporeal nature. And just like a person, that does linger around for a little while. But typically, you don't have animal hauntings for very long. They tend to dissipate. They might hang around for a while, but they do tend to dissipate over time. But I can say right now, every cat I've ever had, all right, has all hung around for many, 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 many weeks or even months after their death. To the point that I will be working at the computer and they will continue their behaviors that they did with me, where I will feel a tail on my leg, or I'll feel some rub or something, or I'll see them moving, and I'll be like, oh, and then I forget for a moment that they're dead.
Yeah, I've had that happen with my couple of dog and a couple of cats. One, my favorite cat, Madison, used to sit on top of my head at night, and I'd put my hand up there, and he'd purr, would put me to sleep, and I'd pet him, which would put him to sleep, and that was our thing, for years. And he had to be put down when I was in the hospital after my accident, so it was kind of really traumatic for me. But when I got home, I was home a few days or whatever, and I had another cat, but they didn't sleep on the bed with me. I felt paw prints on the sheets, and then I felt something go up by my head and plop down to the point where I woke up and actually reached back there, and there was nothing there.
Nothing there.
And the other cat was in the living room.
Yeah.
And that happened multiple times. So that gave me a little bit of comfort.
Yeah, it's
absolutely
a real thing.
Does happen.
It does happen. I've experienced it multiple times with every animal.
Yep.
In fact, we had one cat that would run back and forth across the catwalk. It was literally a catwalk, right? And it was like, with the tail all puffed up and everything. And we would see this. We would continue to see this. And when it happened, you'd forget that the cat was dead. It's like, wait a second, I should not have seen that because that cat's not with us anymore. And there it was. So the energy does linger on in the same way. It just dissipates differently than it does for humans. Okay. Brandon, what's our next one?
So I couldn't see any more on the YouTube chat, but I do have one of my own.
Okay.
How does spiritual attachment work? Can spirits actually attach themselves to people, whether they're at a location willingly investigating or just passing by, or is attachment something more reserved for the demonic?
It is typically related to the vulnerability of the target. That's the typical thing. Now, that's not a fail-safe catch-all, because there's always going to be outliers in everything.
I think you use the word scavengers. They prey on the weak.
It is like a scavenger situation. Not really I don't like using predator because they're not that
brave.
They're not that good. All right. They're not that talented.
Yeah, they're not lions, they're hyenas.
They are.
Yeah, they're little bitches.
Little bitches. So the reality is that they look for vulnerable, easy targets. which is why you don't want to be an easy, vulnerable target. And so you might say, well, what makes a person vulnerable? Well, spiritual apathy is the main one. All right. A life of sin is another. But that's not necessarily, again, definitive. There are very holy people, as we've talked about on this show, that have acquired attachments by virtue of the sheer challenge of it, because there are higher level demons that we would say fall into the fallen angel category that do try to wear down the exceptionally holy. That's a different thing, though. It's not really a demonic attachment. It's not really a demonic attachment. It's more like a demonic assault. And that doesn't happen to average people. It happens to exceptional ones that are living an exceptional spiritual life, which it will never happen to me because I know I don't live an exceptional spiritual life.
I don't think any of us do.
I mean, you have to be out there as a desert father, I think, to really get to that point. And I don't think many of us in the modern world can live like that or know how.
In the sort of media world, the only one I know of is Padre Pio. You know, because I know he was a long time before the internet, but he was kind of well known in his lifetime. Most are not. Most are on Mount Athos undergoing that.
Look what portraying him did to Shia LaBeouf.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah,
just portraying the man.
And this is a guy. This is an actor. This is an actor that definitely had his demons.
He had his demons, and he'll tell you he did.
Yeah, I know he won't. But he's like a new man now.
Oh, absolutely.
Faith can do that to you. Yeah. The sacraments can do that to you, and thank God he found that role.
And that's why I was interested in the line of walking through a site where there's something. Let's look at that positively as well. If when you walk past a church, you make the sign of the cross, and say a prayer of thanksgiving for, in other words, there are ways you can be possessed by the Spirit of God, and that's the surest defense against anything, randomly, being successful in scavenging at you.
Absolutely.
Be strong.
Helena has a question there. You want to read it there, Jamie?
Are skinwalkers real?
Okay. That's a good one because that comes up from time to time. We talked about it last week as well.
Yeah, the definition of it is a cursed shaman.
Are they real? Yes. I mean, are they what people believe them to be? Probably not. I would definitely say that there's a lot of, and this was a big conversation last week. A lot of things have been attributed to them, like being aliens and everything else, that are not necessarily accurate. Okay, they are kind of like a culturally defined phenomenon, honestly, and there is absolute truth to that. I would say that they're probably more accurately associated with what I call an elemental in my classification system. And I would say they are a high level elemental, like up there in the same category of ability that a jinn would be. Very sophisticated, potentially dangerous, but not necessarily evil. There's variation there. They're real. I would stay away from them unless you know what you're doing. You really have to be a part of the culture of the world in which they come from in order to know what you're doing.
Shifters, and they could be interdimensional. Just spitballing from a Native American perspective, but you don't want to come across one, and if you do, turn around and go the other way. It's like in the Appalachian Mountains; they have their own lore about skinwalkers and shifters. If you hear something in the woods, don't go towards it.
Tracy thought she saw something once.
Right, I remember this.
That on the way home from work.
And it was during a full moon.
It was, and she saw something that looked like
a friend of mine saw
literally
one too.
A werewolf type of thing. Maybe next time she's on the show, she can share more about that. But I don't know if you could say it was a skinwalker per se, but it was definitely something that was reminiscent of that. So, they're real. They're just not real in the same way that we define real, because we define real as, something tangibly true in a scientifically observable sense. And most of this stuff is not. In fact, I would say God's not real by that definition because God's not scientifically observable in this universe. You'd have to be out of this universe to observe him. How can you do that? So
When you're living in it.
So in a sense that the atheists are right. He doesn't exist in this context. He only exists outside of this context, which science can't go. So science can't say anything about it. But existence...
And by the same definition, neither does love, neither does freedom.
Correct.
Neither does peace.
Or beauty or art. All of these things that are ethereal concepts come from somewhere else. They're eternal. They're eternal realities. We don't really have a frame of reference for things that are eternal in entropy, do we? Particularly science can't find ways to make entropy more eternal, because there's just no way to do that. And like I said so many times before, nothing's real unless it lasts forever. As soon as it's gone, it might as well have always been gone, because once it's gone, it's gone. There's no coming back from that. And it won't really exist to anything at that point. I mean, look at everything that's here on this planet right now, things that we take for granted, the Nile River and the pyramids with the Sphinx, some of the remarkable architecture around the world, all of these things that we're used to seeing, the Grand Canyon, Las Vegas, and in, Father Chris, the Sydney Opera House, they'll all be gone one day. They will not, none of it will last. There will be a day where all of this is gone. That is absolute scientific fact, because the sun will eventually eat this earth. It's gonna expand to a point that it completely absorbs and burns this place to nothing. And even if we as a civilization can move on into the stars and find another home somewhere, we're not gonna be able to take all the things on the planet with us. And I can tell you, after 1 billion or 2 years of the earth being gone, no one's going to remember or care about the Sphinx or the Nile River or any of this stuff. It's all going to be legend, if it's even remembered at all, which it probably won't be. So it might as well have never existed. And so that's the point I'm trying to say, is that in order for something to be real, it has to always be real at all points in time. Otherwise, if it's no longer real at a certain point in time, it never really existed at all. It was really just a fabrication of temporary phenomenon that appeared into our realm of consciousness and then dissipated just as quickly. So there you go. Okay. Do we have another question? Anybody see any other questions?
Mystic had another one.
Oh, okay. What is
There's loads coming in.
Okay, great. Yeah, let's have it.
Are elementals, you may have already answered this, are elementals demonic in the same way as actual demons, or more closely to the vibration, so they become a classification of a demon?
It's vibrational,
It's all
just
vibrational
like
frequency.
just like people. Look, some of the worst demons I've ever come across were people. Okay, in fact, I'd say the greatest evil I've ever encountered was the evil that man does. I've never met an incorporeal demon, a fallen angel that was worse than a man.
Yeah, well,
Never.
I've said that before on this show. Aren't you afraid of? No, I was a police officer for 26 years. The only thing I have to fear is man. Yeah. 'Cause demons have rules they got to follow.
Yeah.
Men do whatever they want.
Demons are already defeated. Demons are already defeated.
Yeah, exactly.
And from my vantage point as a Catholic exorcist, they obey Christ.
Oh yeah.
They fight it at first, but they obey.
Yeah.
Man doesn't obey Christ. Almost never. You could sit until you're blue in the face telling people about the goodness of God and the grace of Christ, and they will just ignore it and move on. Demons actually listen to you eventually. They act out, they fight you, but they do eventually listen.
Those are whiny babies.
Men don't.
It's the primary reason that demons hate man, because man can disobey God.
Right.
Yeah.
They're envious of that.
They're envious of that freedom. They want that freedom. All right. That's our next one. I'm trying to get to as many as I can before the break. We got a few. We got several minutes, so I can do it.
We got good ones here at the end. But Cheryl put, the Bible says we'll suffer, but God will always provide help, so you're not overcome. But what about people who commit suicide? Aren't they overcome?
Well, you have to understand what being overcome and is or I should say not being overcome is a grace. Grace has to be interacted with through relationship. Okay, so you don't automatically get that as a privilege. You have to cultivate that. And if your choice is to reject that, and to a certain extent in suicide, that can be in some form or fashion. Of course, culpability is a big factor here, and I would argue that most people are not terribly culpable if they get to the point where they can actually defy the survival instinct and end their own life. I would imagine that takes a tremendous amount of courage to do. That is a true rejection of grace, even if it's one that is as spawned out of the result of intense despair that they no longer have any control over. But the reality is, it still has its origin point somewhere. All right. If we are truly, absolutely committed to God and truly trust and give ourselves over to that reality, then the kind of despair that leads to suicide won't happen. You have to understand, it's a progressive aspect that is a degradation of the relationship with God. And that has consequences. Okay? And those consequences are death, whether it be through your own hands or through some other factor, drug overdoses or whatever. It's going to catch up with you. That's why you don't have the luxury of being apathetic. I don't care if you're a Christian. What I care about is you have a relationship with whatever you understand God to be. Find it if you don't know how to, if you don't have it. If you don't know where it is, look for it. It doesn't have to be my way. I'm not saying this as a Christian. I'm not saying this to get you to become a Christian. I'm saying this because everybody should have a relationship with the divine. Okay? And it's always available. You don't have to, you really don't have to look that hard.
No.
It's there.
Go outside and sit in nature for 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
you'll find it.
So being overcome and the promises are definitely dependent upon the relationship. If the relationship's not there, then you're basically stopping God from acting within your life. He's not going to interfere with your choices, your freedom. Even if that means that your freedom brings you to the point of holding a 45 to your head and pulling the trigger, God is not going to stop you from doing that. He will never violate your freedom. It's too sacred to him. It is the most holy thing that you've got. It's not your morality, all right? It's not even your love or your capacity to love. Your most sacred, holy nature is the freedom that he's given you. And that is something he will never violate, ever, even if it means your own demise. But I also have hope that, there is hope in the process of death. I do feel that those that are in that kind of state, I don't think that suicide is necessarily the absolute end. I do feel that even in those last moments, even if it is after death, that there is that. Well, I've said this before on the show, and I think she said it best, and I'm going to keep repeating her because it is really the best answer. Mother Angelica, before she died, when she had her little show on EWTN, was asked this question a lot, and her answer was always, "I don't know what happens. But I do know that when you're dead, God's not done with you yet."
Yeah.
And I find that there is hope for the Christian in that. Okay. So
I do think it's important to say it's not worth the risk.
No, it's not worth the risk because you don't
do it.
Well, you don't know exactly what the consequences are. I can say this. Let me say this from the vantage point. I'm probably going in longer on this question than I wanted to. Because I probably won't be able to get to another one, but let's just go ahead and answer this because it is kind of an important one.
It's very important.
I'm going to say this. Okay. I have dealt with suicides in my work from the spiritual side. And from what I have experienced, it does not bode well.
No.
Okay. That doesn't mean they're damned. Although I wouldn't want to say that I could say that definitively. I don't know. That's for between that person and God, ultimately. I don't make decisions like that. Thank God I don't have to. That would be true judgment. When Matthew 7 says not to judge, that's the kind of judgment he's talking about. You don't have the ability to say who's going to heaven, who's going to hell. That's for God to decide. However, when it comes to people that commit suicide, I will say that in my experience with the spirits that have remained or gotten stuck in that particular moment, it's not favorable.
Didn't we have a case, maybe it wasn't a case of a suicide, but it was a case where we made contact with something and you always say, what can we do to help you? And I think the response was pray. Mm-hmm. I can't remember
I think we
what
can
case that
pray.
might have been,
I think there is definitely
It's either
benefit.
pray or pray for me.
I would say there's benefit in praying for those who have committed suicide, because I do think there can be grace there if the culpability is low. I do think, and I think most of the time it is. I really don't think you can actually commit suicide with full culpability. I can't imagine.
Because it goes against everything
You
you're
have to
made
be
for.
broken.
Yeah.
Your brain has to be misfiring to get to that point. And I don't think that's culpable morally at that point. I think there's something else going on. And I do think there has to be spiritual fail-safes in there, but it's not a license to do it. I mean, it's definitely not a license to do it. Okay. So you don't want to do that. You never want to put yourself into a situation where you could be risking everything when simply.
And God has things for you to do now.
Yes,
God
he
has
does.
things for you to do.
Yeah.
Always.
So you need to do that.
That's
Always.
right. That's right. Okay, so I'm looking at, and of course my feed is all messed up here. I don't even know. I can't even find it. All right. Well, we are not here next week because of Holy Week. Okay, in the Catholic Church we celebrate Holy Week, which means Holy Tuesday. We are celebrating Mass at well, not at this time, but at the time that we would normally be starting Vestiges After Dark. So there is no Vestiges After Dark next week because of Holy Week. But we will be back. I don't know what the show is. I can't find it, but I'll let you know when you'll see it. Just be a part of the Nicolay Network and you'll find it. You have it, Brandon?
I think it's April.
What is it?
April 2nd, solving the
Epicurean paradox. Oh, I'm your guest. I'm your guest, and we're going to talk about the Epicurean paradox. You know what that is, don't you? That is the argument for why God can't possibly be all knowing, all loving, and all, powerful, because evil exists, and Epicurus was somebody that had a real problem with that. So we're going to break that down, and we're going to literally obliterate it, because I have all the answers to the Epicurean paradox. I can solve it, and that will be in 2 weeks, Tuesday, in 2 weeks at 8 p.m. Eastern time. I can't wait to see you all then. I want to thank all of you for watching tonight. I can't believe it. I really cannot believe that we have 326 viewers. That's a record.
We had 329 at one point.
329. Okay, that's a record. That's a record.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. And please join us in 2 weeks, okay? Take care. God bless. And I'll see you out there in the ether.
God bless.